I'm an old woman now, retired, nice, quiet life. I spend a lot of time listening to podcasts, especially the true crime ones. Some nights I hear stories that sound awfully familiar, and here's one you might have never heard before. This happened in the mid-1980s when I was barely 20 years old. I went to a community college in the Midwest, boring, flat, windy, accented with brick buildings. I was out of town, so I lived in the dorms for convenience and to try to save some money. There were 6 of us total inside one unit. We each had a small private bedroom, but we shared this nice long common room and one bathroom. The walls there were thin, cheap carpet accompanied them, and you could hear everything: music, phone calls, people crying, or, well, doing other things. Marcy was loud all the time, even when she was asleep. Donna never left the dorm, only studied. Tish liked attention, if you know what I mean. And Kelly liked horror movies and wore a lot of black. Sharon talked to her parents on the phone every Friday for at least a couple of hours. And then you get to me. I got good grades, had a part-time job, and mostly just kept to myself. Although I did like the occasional party or concert. We had a lot more school in front of us, and since we all got along, we elected to board together again the following semester for a few months, then it was goodbye. That summer, when students were mostly gone, a girl was found half dead just off campus inside an alley. I didn't know her, and I don't think any of us did. The news said that her injuries were bad enough the police thought that she might have been hit by a car and then dragged into the alley itself, an accident that had turned ugly. People talked about it where I lived for a few days, at the diner, on the radio. Then it kind of just faded into background noise. The police didn't say much, and without any more details, it was easy to think it was just kind of random. By the time the fall semester had started, we all moved back into the dorm, and the alley was a place people continued to avoid at night. But the second girl was found 3 weeks into that fall semester. This time, no one tried to offer any kind of reasons. It was the same part of town, but a different alley. The police still didn't release any more details, but everybody could already see the pattern forming. The campus changed almost overnight. More patrol cars, warning flyers taped up to doors, a meeting in the dorm where the director told us not to walk alone at night and to trust our instincts. But we didn't even know what we were looking for. And of course, we were already afraid. So we start pairing up. Late night classes demanded us to stick together. Trips to the store became group outings now. The bars near campus emptied out earlier than usual. Men we didn't recognize stood out like glowing red flags. Not long after, the third girl was found, and we realized exactly how powerless we truly were. Nothing anyone did or was doing was saving them. After that, the police stopped hedging. They weren't issuing graphic warnings. Curfews were fully enforced. They said they believed the killer was a local, a man acting alone, likely in his 30s or 40s, and very familiar with the area itself. Of course, again, that description didn't really narrow anything down, and it made everybody look suspicious. But because of the sudden information dump, the murders actually stopped for a while. Weeks would pass, nothing new. No arrests, no new bodies. That silence was haunting. People relaxed just enough to function, but still nobody felt safe. We kept our door locked at all times, and lights stayed on at night. Hell, Kelly even stopped watching horror movies. We didn't say it out loud, but we all believed the same thing. He's still out there, lurking at the edges of our vision, waiting to jump on the most vulnerable person he could find. That weekend, a girl from another dorm ended up filing a police report. She said a man followed her home from a bar. He stayed behind her the entire walk, never spoke, but was aggressive in his pursuit. Thinking this was the killer, she wasted no time acting. When she cut through the alley, he followed. When she ran, he ran. This alley normally turned into a dead end, but to this woman's fortune, a business had its back door open for a routine cleaning. She slipped into the open business just before the man reached her. But of course, by the time the police arrived, the man was gone. That story moved around like a bad rumor. This girl lived. She could describe him. Tall, dark jacket, work boots, ordinary, but seemed beyond fury. Sunday night, I think around 11, all 6 of us were inside the common room, studying, folding laundry, just trying to keep busy. Outside, the campus was quiet, being patrolled by the police. Then somebody knocked on our door. 1, 2, 3 times. Everybody froze. Marcy leaned toward the people and looked, and her breath hitched. "It's a cop." I looked next. The man was in uniform, but something about it felt off. I didn't recognize the insignia on the patch. "Open the door," he said. "There's a situation nearby. I need to check your unit." Donna shook her head, eyes bugging out of her head. Sharon whispered, "This can't be real." Kelly didn't hesitate. She picked up the phone and dialed 911. "We're calling the cops." His voice changed instantly, screaming through the walls. He started banging on the door, and then he ran off. As his footsteps disappeared, we heard a clatter of something on the floor. We all kind of huddled together inside the common area, dispatch on the phone waiting for somebody to come get us. Police would arrive within minutes. Lights washed everything away, including our worries. Real officers then ran past our door, and they caught him across the street, trying to disappear into the parking lot. His costume ended up being his downfall. Later, we learned that noise that we'd heard was a hammer and a 10-inch screwdriver, items that he'd used in his previous murders. And I was in total shock when we were told that. I had almost opened up the door for him. They moved us out that night, and police took all of our statements. Our parents called, and Sharon's were on campus by the morning. Classes weren't stopped. Just another normal day after the fact. The man's name was released later along with a photo, and I didn't recognize him. None of us did. If you Google enough, I'm sure you can find him. I finished the semester and left town not long after. The dorms remained open. New students moved in and slept in those same beds that we were almost murdered in. I've been crossing Texas pretty much all day, cutting through the stretch of backcountry highway where the land flattens out, doesn't really ever stand back up. No other towns, no exits, just roads, scrub, and butt ugly country. You could see 10 or 15 miles straight ahead without a single bend. And then out of nowhere, my car started jerking. A hard pull to the right, steering going loose for a second, my dashboard lighting up. I eased off the gas and then coasted to the shoulder. By the time I stopped, the tire was completely gone, flapping rubber against the asphalt. I stepped out and felt that heat roll up off the road that was very unforgiving. The tire was shredded down to the rim, but worse than that, there was fluid coming out from beneath my car. Anxiety quickly came to life inside of me. I popped the hood and immediately backed off. Steam hissed up at me in these short bursts. The smell was that of cooking oil. I let the air out and grabbed my phone. No signal, of course. I walked up the shoulder, then back the other way, holding up my phone just out of habit. I'm not even sure that works anymore. Still nothing. I looked down at the highway in both directions. Empty. Nothing was looking good for me in the moment. I checked the trunk. No spare, which made me furious. Just a jack, a tire iron, and a bag of stuff that I did not need right now. The engine was ticking close by as it cooled off, and somewhere out in the brush, insects were clicking in these eerie bursts, cicadas or whatever the hell they're called. The sun was dropping, taking the heat with it, but leaving everything out in this washed out light. I sat on the guardrail and took stock. I had some water, a couple of protein bars, and a jacket, enough to get me through the night if I had to. And that's when it all really hit me. I wasn't going to get help anytime soon, and if somebody did come along, it would be the only car I'd probably see for hours. I looked down the road in front of me and tried to not trip out. I stayed with the car because there wasn't anywhere else really to go. I'm in the middle of nowhere. The heat started to bleed out of the ground once the sun was dropping. The sky went dark, and every few minutes I waved my phone light down the highway, more out of habit than hope. I really, genuinely have never felt alone like that. Then in the distance I heard an engine, loud, rough, and struggling. No muffler. It was sounding like a chariot from heaven in my ears in the moment though. Headlights then appeared far off, growing faster. I could see it in the fading sunlight. It was a black van, lifted, riding on thick off-road tires. The windshield was dark enough that I couldn't even see the driver at all. I stepped close to the shoulder and waved my light. The van slowed once it was actually within range of me. Salvation. I found a spot on the shoulder just behind my car. The engine stayed running, and after a beat, the driver's door opened and a guy hopped down. He seemed to be in his mid-20s, thin and wired. Sunglasses still on, even in the near dark. A bandana loose around his neck, cigarette burning in his hand. He looked around with a smile. Hell of a place to get stuck, huh? "Yeah," I said. "I blew a tire, no service. Just my luck." He chuckled, then turned into a slow circle, taking in the road, the brush, the dark. "No service, huh?" he said again. "That's real bad luck." It's starting to sound like a catchphrase at this point. "Well, good thing I came along," he added. "Let's see what you did." He crouched by the wheel, pulled out a flashlight that was unbearably bright. The beam snapped on and brought shadows to life all around us, and he whistled. "Whew, you picked up a big knuckle of metal." He then angled the flashlight. A long, jagged strip of steel was wedged into the wheel well, bent and chewed up to hell. "That'll stop any rig." I glanced over at him. "You think that came off something?" He shrugged at me. "Out here, it could be anything. Maybe it bounced off a trailer that had just been tumbling down the highway." He helped me jack the car up. His van's headlights flooded the scene, washing everything else out past the shoulder, and the highway behind us quickly vanished into complete blackness. We played with the lugs for a while. He tugged on the ruined tire with a grunt. Something's catching in the back. The lugs are clear, so I don't know what it is. I can't see it." "What do you need?" I asked him, and he looked over at me for a second, and I mean really looked, then smiled. "Oh, I'm gonna need you under there," he said. "Just tell me what's hanging it up." I hesitated. The jack creaked slightly under the weight of the car. "It's just for a second," he said. "I'll be right here." I didn't want to crawl under my car at night with a stranger standing over me, but I wanted to be off that road more than anything else. I just had to press myself against it for just a second. "All right," I said. "Let me use your flashlight." He lifted it slightly. "This one? I'll angle it around. I'll hold it for you." I nodded back. So I got on my back and slid under the car. The ground around me was cold and smelled like burnt oil. I squinted, trying to make sense of all the shapes in the dark, and there was nothing out of place to my eye, at least. I still can't see much," I said to him. "Can you angle that flashlight a little better? This one?" Then the light exploded, white hot. It almost made me nauseous. My body locked up, every muscle clenched, my jaw snapped shut so hard I thought I broke my teeth. God knows how many thousands of lumens cold clocked me out of nowhere and sent me into this lizard brain mode. It was like he tasered my eyes. And somewhere above me, the metal shifted and the car rocked. Panic then shot through me. I twisted and rolled, pulling myself sideways as the car tipped. And then it slammed down right where I'd been. The jack snapping loose, the frame smashing into the asphalt. I watched my exposed frame leave a dent half an inch deep. I scrambled backward. What the fuck just happened? The guy shoved the car again, trying to roll it further. Was this his plan all along? When he saw me upright, his face went flat. "Hey," he said quickly. "Easy, that was an accident." But I ran. I bolted straight off the shoulder into the desert, crashing through the brush and loose rock. "Hey, you okay?" It was an accident." I dropped behind a low-rise and just stayed there, crouched, watching through the brush. I knew I was safe out here in the dark, at least for the moment. He paced along the road with the flashlight, sweeping the beam back and forth, breathing hard, nervous. He kept talking, saying accident over and over again, like he's trying to convince some kind of lawyer in front of him. I'm not moving. I'm not going to let this asshole have any satisfaction whatsoever. After a while, he just stopped. I heard a door slam, then the van's engine revved up. Headlights swung across the shoulder once, looped, then disappeared. I stayed hidden long enough for that sound to fade, waiting for silence to swallow everything up in the world. I stayed in the brush for a couple of hours. I couldn't trust that he was really gone. When I walked back to the car, the road was now empty. No headlights, no engine noise, just my car that still was wounded on the shoulder. I got inside, locked the doors, and just waited. I didn't turn anything on. I just watched the road and listened, ready to run again if I needed to. I figured I'd be able to hear him just like before. But he didn't come back. Morning came and I was in disbelief. The desert was normal, and a patrol car pulled over a little after sunrise. The trooper took one look at my car and nodded. "Let me guess, you had a real bad night." I told him what happened, kept it simple. Flat tire, van, guy with a flashlight. The more I thought about it, the more I think he actually hit me with a stun gun after he flashed me. Then the car coming off the jack. When I described the van, he stopped riding and stepped away to make a call. You're not the first person to mention that vehicle to me. A tow truck came, and while they loaded up the car, the trooper walked around the shoulder, found the piece of metal from the wheel well, bagged it, and took a few photos. And that evening, he gave me a call. They picked the guy up outside a small town where I broke down. Same van, same setup. Inside, they found equipment that matched everything that I ascribed to them, along with evidence tying him to several roadside deaths over the last few years. Breakdown after breakdown that oddly resulted in these bizarre and mysterious deaths over the past few years that remained a mystery. The trooper didn't go into more details because the investigation was ongoing. I travel much differently now. Almost being killed in the middle of nowhere turned out to be far more nightmarish than I ever would have expected, and being left and crushed slowly to death by my own car to boot. To hell with all that. I stay strapped and keep a spare tire. I don't take bullshit back roads, and if I do, I've got a map and a line directly to civilization. Fool me once. When I was in 5th grade, not much happened where I lived at. It was considered a retirement community with the same houses, the same kids, the same routine. The river ran behind our neighborhood. It was dirty and brown, and none of us really gave it a second thought. Just like that stream, we lived inside this boring place. But that all changed in the spring that year when somebody found a suitcase inside the water. At first, it was just normal small town talk. Kids whispering on the bus. Somebody said a fisherman hooked it and then dragged it in. Somebody else said a dog pulled it up on the bank. And by the time we got home that afternoon, my mom was on the phone. Her voice was tense and she was staring out the kitchen window. My dad didn't turn on the TV when he got home, which was unusual. He sat at the table, told us straight up that the police had pulled a body from the river. In a suitcase, he said, and it all clicked together. And that's the part that stuck with me more than anything else. A suitcase was something you took on vacation, something with wheels and a handle, not something you put a person inside. How the hell could somebody even fit in there? The details would come out at school. Somebody had chopped her up and fit her inside like a puzzle piece. Nobody had any clue who she was. Adults said that she was probably a prostitute, and that word floated around school for a few weeks. Half the kids not even knowing what it meant, just that it sounded bad. She wasn't identified, at least not that I ever heard, and nobody talked about any kind of suspect. The police taped off the river path and investigated for weeks on end. Parents didn't let their kids wander around anymore. My mom took to locking all the doors every second of the day, and my dad walked the yard with a flashlight after dark. For the first time, the idea settled in that somebody had done this and then just gone home, that they possibly lived somewhere nearby, maybe close enough to hear us laughing in the street or see lights on at night, to know our names and our schedules. And that's when the river started feeling like a part of the neighborhood and more like an omen. Nobody went down there anymore. And by the end of that summer, 2 more bodies had turned up. Both women, both cut apart in the same way. One in another suitcase, the other stuffed into a duffel bag. Police still weren't saying much, but they didn't have to. Everybody knew it was the same guy. They were keeping all of the more intimate details until they were closer to some kind of breakthrough. After all this, our parents may as well have been law enforcement too. They hovered over everything. No more riding bikes past sundown. No more cutting through the woods to save any kind of time. If you were outside, somebody's dad was watching from a porch or a garage, usually holding a golf club or a baseball bat. We adjusted because kids always do. There were 4 of us total, me, Aaron, Kyle, and Ben. And we spent most afternoons holed up at Aaron's house because his parents worked late. We set up camp in his bedroom on the 2nd floor, the one with the view of the river path and the tree line beyond it. Aaron had binoculars. His uncle had used them for hunting. We took turns looking at them like snipers inside an eagle's nest. And we watched everything. People walking dogs, joggers, old couples shuffling past with grocery bags. Every stranger that went by would get studied by us. Every parked car was scrutinized. We were half scared and half bored, which is a whirlwind combination at 11 years old. Could be anybody, Kyle kept saying. That's how they do it. Yeah, they always live close by, Ben added. Fuel on the fire. And we all believed that. The killer wasn't some shadow creature drifting in from the highway. He was a local, He bought gas, he waved at his neighbors. He knew where the river had enough power to move some kind of big heavy suitcase like that. And when the news broke about a fort discovery, things tipped from fear into grand paranoia. Police swarmed the river once again, farther downstream this time. Helicopters thudded overhead for quite some time. The rumor was another body had come floating through. But this time it wasn't a body, just blood, this unbelievable amount of it, and nobody knew what to make of it. Now the river was closed off completely, and parents warned us time and time again to not go anywhere near it under any circumstances, which meant obviously that we started talking about going. As mentioned, kids are dumb as hell, and especially when something appears scary. We planned it like complete idiots. Midnight, flashlights with fresh batteries stick together, no screaming unless somebody was actually being attacked. Aaron even brought this cheap disposable camera, like we might make some kind of major breakthrough or something. We met at the edge of a taped off trail, hearts pounding, nervous as hell, trying to come off as brave and pull together. Crawling under the tape felt crazy, as if we just crossed into some kind of afterlife. The woods around the river were swallowing everything up, and our flashlights carved out these narrow tunnels, catching branches, rocks, but nothing alive. Nobody said a word, and every snap of a twig made each one of us flinch. And at first, we found nothing. No tools, no stains, no signs of anybody ever camping or dumping anything. Just dirt, bugs, and the steady rush of water, getting louder and louder as we got closer. When we finally reached the riverbank, nobody still was saying anything for quite some time. We just kind of stood there, listening, expecting what? I don't know, a scream, a splash, anything to confirm the knots in our bellies, but nothing presented itself. Aaron finally pointed downstream. The bridge. It was old, concrete, barely wide enough for two cars to pass by on. We weren't supposed to be anywhere near it at night, and the idea of getting closer made my stomach do a backflip, but nobody wanted to say no. Nobody wanted to be the scaredy cat. Halfway there, we saw lights. There was this RV sat upon the bridge, engine running, headlights on, brake lights glowing red, but it wasn't moving. The passenger door hung open, and somebody inside shifted, metal clinking slowly. None of us spoke. We crouched instinctively. Being seen could mean death. "The hell's he doing?" Ben whispered, and an answer came a second later. Something heavy tipped over the railing. It teetered, caught for a second, then slid and plummeted into the water with a deep, wide splash. It was a suitcase. I knew it before my brain caught up. The blocky shape, the way it fell as one unit. The man leaning over the railing looked down at his handiwork. His face was in shadow, but I could see his hand moving, rubbing at the front of his jeans. My legs locked. I couldn't breathe. He climbed back into the driver's seat, shut the door, released the brake, and the RV rolled forward, tires purring softly, disappearing off into the woods. Nobody moved until that sound was completely gone. And then we ran until we hit the edge of the neighborhood. Aaron starts yelling, then screaming, and somebody else was in tears behind me. Porch lights came on, a man stepped out in socks and asked what the hell was wrong with us. We tried to explain to him the RV, the bridge, the suitcase, and that word did it. Parents came out after that, and my dad told my mom to call the police. I think everybody was making that call. My dad took off down the street toward the river with two other parents behind him, half dressed and pissed off. Squad cars arrived just a few minutes later, red and blue lights painting everything in sight. The police separated us and took statements, and we told the same story over and over again. An old RV, yellow headlights, suitcase over the railing. The cop writing things down did not interrupt, just let our story flow. They found the suitcase within 15 minutes because it hadn't gone far. The river by the bridge was slow moving, filled with branches and deadfall. One of the officers pulled the zipper back, just enough to peek inside, then closed it again, and everybody knew what was in there. Nobody let us near it. The search started immediately. They put out a description for the RV, older model, light colored, possibly rusted out. Roadblocks went up on the highway. Patrols ran all night long, and by morning, there was nothing. No RV, no suspects, no answers. The school was closed the next day too. The river was essentially condemned to the public. Nobody complained about being bored. I never left my window. My dad's binoculars glued to my face now. It felt dumb to me to stop looking for him. Shit, we were the only ones to actually see him, to have some semblance of an idea of what we were looking for. And I watched every street as much as I possibly could. And then I saw an old RV rolling through a few streets over, just kind of drifting. It never stopped cruising, just passed through, almost as if it were lost. The windows were too dark to see an actual driver. I yelled for my parents, but by the time they came upstairs, it was of course gone. They called 911 anyway. The police came back, took another report, and asked if I was sure. Yeah, I'm sure. They took my statement and resumed the hunt. No one was ever arrested, at least to my knowledge. The killings stopped, at least in our area, and eventually the river opened back up. Kids started fishing out there again. Life went on. But there for a year or two, we were all convinced he'd come back, slit our throats in our sleep for seeing what he'd done. Albuquerque, New Mexico. I was heading to a friend's house off campus that evening, just after sundown. She texted me directions, but something must have been off because the further I drove, the worse the streets started to look around me. The shops turned to boarded up windows, the graffiti got thicker, and every person on the sidewalk seemed to be watching my car instead of minding their own business. And that's when I realized that I'd wandered into the war zone off Central. I just needed a place to turn around. I spotted this old apartment complex with flickering floodlights and pulled in, easing through the lot while a few kids darted between cars chasing a deflated soccer ball. I was rolling pretty slow, trying not to hit anybody, when this guy came out of nowhere like he'd almost been waiting for me. He was a walking stereotype. Shaved head, locks, Ben Davis shirt, long dicky shorts, white tube socks pulled high, threw up a hand and shouted, "Yo, stop." I hit the brakes, heart pounding already. I had my phone in one hand ready to fake call. My other hand was resting near the gear shifter just in case I needed to bolt. But I couldn't just floor it, not with those kids running around in the parking lot. Jogging up to my window, grinning wide but not friendly. "Yo," rolled down the window, man. Against all of my good judgment, I cracked it. "What's up?" I asked. "You got any coke?" he asked me. I blinked. Only if it's Mexican coke," I said, trying to sound casual, praying he'd laugh and just move on. He did, in a sudden outburst that showed his gold teeth. "Shit, man, can I get a lift down to the store for some smokes? You mind?" Every instinct inside of me told me no, but something about his tone, half joking, half daring me, made me hesitate. Maybe I didn't want to offend him, maybe I was scared. Either way, I said, "Yeah, sure, hop in." He slid into the passenger seat, noticed the music right away. "Hey, that's Tribe Called Quest." "Yeah," I said back. He slapped the dashboard. "Man, I've seen them 3 times back in Cali. Q-Tip, that dude's a legend." Did help a little bit. Talking about music humanized him, and for a minute I started to think maybe I was overreacting. The gas station was only a few blocks away, but the drive felt like it took forever. He kept shifting around in the seat beside me, scratching his leg, glancing in the side mirror like he was expecting somebody to be following us. He told me his name was Danny, but didn't offer a last name. Said he used to run with some boys out in LA, then moved here just to chill, whatever that meant. We pulled up to the Circle K and he told me to keep the engine running. "I'll be quick, man, don't trip." He went inside and I sat there sweating bullets, watching him through the glass doors. He was talking to the clerk and pointing at something, then pacing near the back. After a few minutes, he disappeared behind an aisle, and I began counting the seconds, debating on whether or not to leave. Then suddenly the doors slam open, and he comes sprinting out with 2 paper bags clutched directly to his chest. "Go! Go, man, go! They're calling the cops!" He yelled at me, diving into the passenger seat. I didn't really think about it, I just hit the gas. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I could hear sirens somewhere off in the distance, rapidly closing in. He was laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Yo, you should have seen your face." I shot him a look, white-knuckled on the steering wheel. "Did you just rob that place?" "Nah, man," he said between laughs. "I'm just messing with you. Relax, damn." I didn't know really whether to believe him, but we were already pulling back into the apartment lot. He told me to stop near that same corner that I picked him up at. "Hey," he said, suddenly calm, almost thankful. "I don't blame you for being nervous around me. You're actually a pretty good dude for stopping. He dug into one of the bags and handed me a pack of Funyuns and a glass bottle of Mexican Coke, then reached into his pocket, pulled out a small dime bag, and tossed it into my lap. "Oh, to thank you," he said, opening up the door. He gives me a nod, then walks off toward the shadows between two buildings. I sat there for a long moment, engine still idling, staring at that dime bag in my lap in complete disbelief. To this day, I'll fully admit that was some of the best weed I've ever smoked. Not the worst wrong turn I've taken either, but it was one that taught me just how thin that line is between danger and chance. You really never know who's walking up to your window until it's too late. My name is Rich, and my fiance's name is Joanne, who, for this story, I'm gonna call Joe, who also comes with me on nearly every long-distance trip that I take. We run a towing and automotive transport company out of New York State, specializing in exotic and luxury vehicles. It's not uncommon for us to haul a six-figure car across the country, but on this particular trip, it's, well, one I'm never gonna forget. It was early May 2025. We just delivered a Lamborghini down to northern Florida. That drive south was pretty smooth. No dot inspections, no traffic, nothing but open road. I remember thinking to myself, this might actually be a stress-free run for once. That changed, however, the moment that we tried to unload. There were lots of these little wrong turns that we'd made on this trip, and this was just the first one. My truck, brand new, top of the line, computer-controlled everything, suddenly threw an electrical fault mid-unload. The PTO light went out, the hydraulics cut off, and the whole system just died. Luckily, I'd gotten the Lambo off safely, but the truck was half dead. The builder back in South Carolina told me, "Bring it here and we'll get you first thing tomorrow morning." So we fueled up, grabbed a couple of energy drinks, and hit the road north. It was 9:45 p.m. when we pulled into a gas station just outside of Jacksonville. While I filled the tank, Joe ran inside for some snacks and drinks, which is an absolute must. That's when I noticed it, this black Chevy Impala, older model, maybe 2010 with tinted windows, parked across the lot, engine idling. When I fired up my truck, their lights turned on too. Now in the moment, I brushed it off because who wouldn't? Coincidence, I figured. We get on I-95 and the night was dark. That kind of dark that eats headlights. Air was heavy, thick with the feeling of a storm brewing. Then, just as Joe mentioned rain, it comes down in sheets. She glanced back and said, "Hey, that car's really riding your bumper." I checked the mirrors. I couldn't see much. Then, whoever it was quickly swings over to the left lane and hit me with their high beams, just blinding me completely. What a dickhead, I thought to myself. It was annoying, sure, but I've seen plenty of impatient and incompetent drivers. I ignored it and kept on rolling. Hours pass and that storm never really lets up. By the time we hit Columbia, South Carolina, I'd forgotten all about that tailgater. That is, until that same black Impala comes flying up beside us. It swerves over into my lane, cutting me off so hard that I had to slam the brakes. Joe jolted awake, cursing, and the Impala then slows down to about 55, then 40, then 35. It was deliberate, taunting almost. I dropped the gear and floored the accelerator, passed it, and finally got a good look. The tint was so dark that I couldn't see a single thing inside, or a person, and that's when it clicked. "That's the same car from Jacksonville," I said. Joe nodded. She had noticed it too. She booked us a hotel near the dealership, 15 minutes away, just off I-85, ETA of around 3:30 a.m. That last hour would really feel endless, and that Impala stayed behind us the whole time. When we pulled into the hotel parking lot at around 4 a.m., the rain was still hammering down. The lot was packed, but we squeezed into a space. Across the road, half hidden in the rain, sat that same Impala, idling on the shoulder. Joe looked over at me nervously. "Okay, do you think he's after the trailer or what he thinks is inside it?" I shrugged, though deep down my gut was screaming, yes. Before stepping out, I reached into my bag, unzipped the hidden compartment, and pulled out my Glock 19, sliding it in my waistband. Joe nodded silently. "On three," I said. We run for the door. We bolted through the downpour, slamming through the hotel's sliding doors, and were hit with the stench of mildew, cigarette smoke, and something worse, an undertone of urine. A front desk clerk waddles out from the back room. He smiled, but something about it was just off. "Checking in?" he asked, and his tone was a little too casual, too familiar, too friendly. I handed over my driver's license as well as my credit card. He pulled the reservation, making a key card and smiling still. "First floor for you two, right around the corner." He winked at Joe as he slid the key across the counter. "Breakfast is at 6:30. "Yeah, thanks," I muttered, hurrying it off. Joe was squeezing my arms and looked up at me. "What a creep." I nodded back in agreement. When we reached the room, the smell wasn't much better. The place was old, damp and stained, and Joe sat on top of the bed, still fully clothed. "I can't wait to leave here," she said quietly, as I walked out of the room's prison-style bathroom. "It's just one night, thankfully," I told her. We changed, closed the curtains, and tried to get some sleep. An hour later, I was half asleep when I heard the faint rattle of a doorknob. At first, I thought I was dreaming, but it kept going and got louder and more violent. It was the adjoining room door. Somebody was trying to get in. The realization shot me awake quicker than anything really has before. I reached over for my Glock and aimed it at the door. My main concern was Joe. I kept my focus, training my pistol at the door. Joe was still sleeping soundly beside me. For 30 minutes straight, that handle shook, and then it was just followed by silence. I exhaled slowly, and that's when something moved outside the window. I caught it in my peripheral vision. I froze. A tall, thin shadow stood on the other side of the curtain. Then, 3 slow, deliberate taps. I yanked the curtains open, and there he was, a man in black with a ski mask on, standing inches from the glass. I raised the gun at him. "Back off, or I'll shoot." He didn't move, just raised both hands, then pulled the mask up, just enough to reveal his mouth. He smiled at me. It was wide, too wide and full of teeth, and he slammed his fist on the glass, and Joe screamed, jolting awake. "There's somebody out there," I shouted at her. She ran over, but when she looked out, no one, just the rain. Then she saw a smudged handprint on the outside of the window, and that was enough. We packed everything and stormed down to the front desk. "Yeah, we're checking out," I said, throwing the key across the counter. The clerk didn't even blink. "Aw, already? Why not stay a little longer?" His grin spread was unnaturally wide. "Maybe, love on each other a little bit." "Yeah, no," I said, and we continued to walk out. I unholstered my gun and we sprinted to the truck, Joe locking herself in. As I loaded up our last bag, I noticed the trailer's stepladder was down. Somebody had tried to pry the side door open and parked just beyond us. And wouldn't you know it, the Impala. "Rich," Joe yelled at me, "let's go." As I climbed into the driver's seat, my headlights illuminated the figure standing beside the car. Same man, same mask. Staying in this hotel was our second wrong turn. "Drive," Joe said flatly. "Say less." I hit the gas, tearing out of that lot and back onto the highway. The clock on the dashboard read 6 a.m., and neither of us really spoke or said a word for miles. Finally, Joe whispered after a while, "The sunrise is beautiful." I glanced over, her hand in mine, and felt my shoulders drop. "Yeah," I said quietly, "it is." We made it to the dealership half an hour later or so, parked and slept in the truck until the shop opened. Now, I've seen a lot on the road. I've been followed, almost hit by wrong-way drivers, and seen unexplainable things in the mountains, but nothing has ever rattled me like that before. Not like that night. The thought of losing my soulmate to someone dangerous or being taken away from her, I can't handle that. One of the main reasons I carry is to protect us, our equipment, and the valuable cargo that we haul. When the sky turns dark and the stars and the moon are hidden by cloud and rains, if I glance out a window, I can still see that smile through the glass. I didn't want to be in New Jersey. That's the first thing that I'm going to tell you, because I wasn't supposed to be on this trip at all. I'm actually not sales. I don't pitch. I don't stand in front of boardrooms. I sit in a chair and pull numbers. That's what I do. Quiet work, Excel work. If I talk to anybody, it's through an email. But late on the night before, I got a call from my boss saying, "Listen, there's a small change of plans. They want to see supporting financials. Legal wants you in the room." I told him, I wasn't scheduled for this. I don't even have a suit."
Buy one when you land," he said. "Look, it'll be easy. Fly out, be there for the meeting, back up the model if they push it. You're not even presenting, you're just kind of there."
Why can't they send the deck?
"They have the deck. They need a human too."
And so that was what it was. I took a last-minute flight out and landed in Newark and followed the signs for car rentals because all the team cars were already in use, and nobody had the bandwidth to loop back and just pick me up. I grabbed the cheapest one available, this sedan that they had. It was a gray compact smelling like somebody had sprayed cologne over cigarettes. I didn't care. I just wanted to get to the hotel, send my wife a text that I was in fact alive, and run numbers in peace until the following morning. The meeting was at 9 the next day. I had the financial data on a thumb drive in my bag. That little drive was the reason I was there after all. If their guy in a room asked about cash flow projections or margins, I'd be able to say, "Here's the 5-year picture," and not sound like a complete idiot. That's all I had to do. Simple. Extra paycheck, just deliver it. No sightseeing, no dinner, no might as well check out the city. None of that. Hell, it's New Jersey. I was there to get in and get out. Just hotel, shower, cheap meal, sleep, meeting, done. But the thing about being somewhere you've never driven before, especially when it's already dark and the GPS on your phone begins to act a little glitchy, it doesn't matter how simple your plan is because now you're in it. I wasn't even 20 minutes out of the airport before I knew I was in trouble. I'd missed my turn leaving Newark, and that's all it took. One wrong exit and everything started to blur together. My phone map spun and lagged, the blue dots sliding around like it didn't know where I was. At one point, it said I was in the middle of the ocean. The signs flew past me, couldn't read any of them, and the traffic was brutal. Horns, brake lights, semis cutting each other off. Every time I thought I'd corrected the course, another lane would end, another detour would come up, another split would appear without warning. This road system was impossible. After 15 minutes or so of fighting it, I realized that I'd lost track of everything that felt familiar. The street lights were spreading out, the traffic was drained, and the buildings grew older and closer together. The GPS finally recalculated, but the directional voice was silent, so I found myself funneled down this narrow ramp onto an unlit neighborhood. It's fine, cities are confusing. I'd turn around, make it right. But the first thing that I noticed was the people, dozens of them, all walking or standing around on corners. Even though it was really late at night, some looked half awake, wandering around, others just watched the cars go by. My stomach was knotting up. The storefronts had bars in the windows. Half the streetlights were dead. I didn't even know the name of the town, but later on, I'd learned that it was Camden. I slowed down at a stop sign, checking the map again. That's when 2 men on the sidewalk turned their heads at the same time. Just a glance, but they kept watching. One raised his hand like he was pointing something out. I rolled forward, trying to not make eye contact. Every block that I drove, more people would appear. A man leaning against a parked car, a group by a corner store, someone crossing the street in slow motion like they wanted to force me to stop. I kept moving though, refusing to let the car idle. I felt like I was a tank in a full of sharks. Rerouting, my phone said again. I felt like throwing it out the window. It was useless. I ended up turning down the side street that looked a little wider, a place I could hopefully flip a U-turn in. The pavement changed from blacktop to cracked concrete, houses pressed in closely, windows dark. I passed one with police tape fluttering on the porch railing. I said out loud to nobody but myself that I shouldn't be here. Then I saw this light, a single red light stop ahead, the only one in view. I needed a break to check the map, so I pulled up to it and stopped. And that was a mistake. At first, I really thought the area around me was deserted. The cross street looked empty, and then from my left, I saw a group standing by the corner, 3, maybe 4 men total. They hadn't looked my way until the car stopped, and now they were all just staring directly at me. I tried to look calm, one hand on the wheel, eyes forward, and the light stayed red. Then the men started walking, not rushing, just kind of drifting closer, splitting up as they got toward me. One on my side, one on the passenger door, and the other toward the hood. I reached over and hit the lock button. The click sounded like a gunshot inside the car. And that was enough to set them all off. One of them grinned and called out to me. "Oh, you scared, man? We're just saying hi." The others laughed. I kept my hands visible on the wheel. I'm just lost," I said through the glass. "Trying to get back to the highway. That's all." The one in the front stepped closer until he was right at my bumper. Highway's that way," he said, pointing behind me. "Why'd you lock your door then?" The light still didn't change, and I could hear my heart over the idling engine. Another one came up to the passenger window and peered in. "Yo, he's got a rental," he said. "Look, airport tag. This fool is an out-of-towner." That made the others laugh even harder. "Ooh, a tourist," one said. "You picked the wrong street, dummy." They circled the car tighter. My phone screen went black from the timeout, and for a brief moment, I couldn't even recall my unlocking pattern. "Hey," one said, tapping the glass with a ringed finger. "Roll it down, buddy." I shook my head. "Roll it down." I cracked it maybe an inch, my voice trembling. I just need directions." He smiled at that, big white teeth, dark eyes flat as oil. "Nah, you're already where you need to be." I noticed his hand, he was gripping something, a small length of pipe wrapped up in tape. Behind me, somebody slapped the trunk. "Yo, pop the trunk, let's see what he's got in here." I jumped in my seat. The one near the door laughed at me. "You shaking, man? You good? Ain't nobody gonna hurt you if you chill." I just want to leave," I said. "So go." "The light's red." They all cracked up at that. "The light's red," one repeated, mocking me. "Man, you better pray that thing changes before I get bored. People like you get killed out here." "The light's red, damn, homie." The one at the passenger side bent to see in the car, looking for my hands. "You on the phone?" "No." "You sure? Because I don't like surprises." He pounded the glass twice, hard enough to make it rattle. The one at the front spat on the hood. The sound of their voices were rising up now, layered, cruel, overlapping, like they couldn't really decide what they want to do. "Pop it open, step out of the car. Where you headed, boss? Bet he got cash on him." The light still was red, and I stared at it until my eyes started to water. I didn't know what it was, but I was just frozen. In fear or whatever. Fear of having to run somebody over, fear of damaging the rental, fear of overreacting. One of them slammed against the windshield with his palm, and I flinched back. Another hit the side mirror, flipping it inward. Somebody behind kicked a bumper. "Yo, you hearing me?" the first one shouted. "Look at me when I talk to you." I'm looking," I said. "I hear you." "Then quit being a bitch. Open the door." I shook my head at him. "Fine," he said, bringing up the pipe. "We'll open it for you then." Out of the corner of my eye, blue and red lights then washed across the buildings. A short burst of siren followed, just a chirp, and the men stopped in mid-motion. I felt like I'd been saved, like God reached himself down and set that patrol car right there for me. A cruiser sat halfway up the next block, angled toward us. Its spotlight snapped on, lighting up the whole intersection. The cop's voice then came through this loudspeaker.
"Gentlemen, hands visible. Let's not make this complicated. Move it along."
One by one, the men backed up, pretending it was nothing. We were just talking," one said, palms up, and within seconds they were drifting back off into the dark. The officer's voice came once more.
"Driver, proceed forward slowly."
My foot barely even found the gas. I rolled through the intersection, hands trembling so hard I could barely even steer my car. The light turned green behind me, finally, and it actually made me laugh because even the cop had told me to roll through the red light. My lack of survival skills were glaring for all to see. I didn't look back. I drove until the glow of the highway signs came up again, white and sterile up against the night sky. My hands were killing me from gripping that wheel so hard. I missed 2 chances to merge because I couldn't trust myself to look anywhere but straight ahead. When I finally reached the on-ramp, I pulled over on the shoulder and just sat there with the hazards blinking. The silence inside the car was so complete that I could hear my organs working. I checked my mirrors, empty. The blue and red flash from that cruiser was long gone now. I didn't even know if the other officer had followed them or just waited until I was moving. I didn't care. I just knew I'd been seconds away from something irreversible. The hotel was another 30 minutes down the interstate. I kept the GPS muted and followed the signs by instinct, white-knuckling it the whole way. When I finally parked, I just sat there for 10 minutes before I finally got the courage to get out. My reflection in the window didn't even look like me. Eyes wide, mouth dry, collar crooked. Once inside, the desk clerk just smiled at me, like nothing in the world was even wrong. "Hey sir, late night?" she asked me. All I could say was, "Yeah, you could say that." The meeting the following morning went fine. I answered what I had to, nodded when spoken to, and smiled when it was finally over. Nobody knew that I'd almost been dragged out of a car that night before. Nobody knew I spent the whole presentation hearing the slap of hands on glass and the sound of a pipe tapping up against my window. I flew home that evening. I looked down from the plane windows as the lights of New Jersey disappeared over cloud cover. And in that moment, I told myself one thing. Absolutely no more surprise visits to New Jersey, and absolutely no getting lost in Camden again. I hadn't planned on going out there. It was a Friday, work was dead, and my phone was quiet, and I didn't have anybody to answer to that weekend. I looked at my apartment, the laundry piled up in the corner, the same TV show, and I felt like I just kind of needed some air. I couldn't handle another night in the hamster wheel. So I threw my gear in the truck: stove, tent, bag, a little hatchet that I kept in the living room, a couple of tarps, cooler full of beer, and gas station grade food. Nothing fancy. I didn't really pack like a responsible adult, just kind of grabbed what I thought I would want and figured everything else would work itself out. You know, the American way. I headed out of town late afternoon, pointed the truck toward the highway. Once you're 20-30 minutes past that last grocery store, it starts to actually feel like you're slipping off the edge of the map. By the time you're 2 hours out, the radio goes to static, and it's just tree line after tree line, cattle fences, dirt road, and the sky. I kept driving. Eventually, I cut off the main road onto this older service road. It wasn't marked and there wasn't any signs, just a pair of ruts that go off through the trees. I've been down plenty of roads like that before on hunting trips and figured I'll just find a pullout and call it good. I wasn't trying to backpack 10 miles in or anything, just wanted to be where nobody else would bother me. But the thing is, I was not alone back there. Once I got deep enough, I started spotting these little pop-up camps tucked off the road. You know the kind: beat up old tents, folding tables, tarps strung between trees, a smoking ring of rocks that may or may not be legal, depending on the time of the year. Weekend people. You see kids on bikes, somebody's dog trotting along off the leash, a guy sitting in a lawn chair drinking beer like he's at a tailgating party. And one of those guys flagged me down. He was older, late 60s, maybe 70s, real sunburned face, what my father called a tackle box skin. Long gray hair, stepped out almost right in front of my truck and lifted up his hand. So I slowed and rolled the window down. "Evening," he said, grinning at me. "You're getting out of here at the perfect time." "Yeah, is that right?" I said. He leaned in a little closer. Sitting there in my truck, I'll admit it was very weird. "You're all clearing out," he said. "You want quiet? I'll give you a spot that nobody bothers you." I don't know why I listened to him. Maybe it was his confidence or something else, I don't know. "Look, keep on this road," the old timer said. "You'll see this cattle gate on the left. It's not locked, just chained. Go through. After that it gets a little tight, but don't stop. You'll come to a pond. The east side's firm, the west side's soft. Camp on the east side. Nobody'll see you." Then he winked at me. Perfect weekend to be alone. I thanked him, patted my driver's door, and rolled on. The gate was in fact right where he said it was. Rusted, chain loop, but not locked. I unhooked it and drove through and latched it behind me. The trail narrowed to 2 dusty ruts under branches that scraped the sides of my truck. The further I went in, the quieter it seemed to get. No wind, not even birds. Then I saw a small pond reflecting in the trees, dead snags leaning across the water, and beside it was a flat little clearing that looked like it was made for one tent. Somebody had definitely camped there before. Stones in a ring, black with old ash, a few logs dragged into place, hidden off from the road, invisible unless you knew where you were looking. I only glimpsed a flash of it, to be honest. So I parked, hauled in my gear, and set up my camp. There was a nice 20-foot gap between the truck and my tent, as this little gulch kept me from driving in completely. It felt perfect, the kind of quiet that made me want to get drunk by myself. I didn't really waste any time. Got a fire going before dark, cracked open a beer and cooked my dinner, hot dogs, chili, and a bag of chips. I hung my Bluetooth speaker from a tree branch, played an old podcast, some kind of true crime show that I'd downloaded before. The voices sounded oddly comforting out there too, and I told myself I'm only going to have a couple more beers before bed, but time slips when you're the only one awake for miles. By full dark, the fire had burned tall and hot, throwing light high up into the trees. I could see my breath in the cool air, hear the crackle of the logs, and sometimes other noises too. A shuffle, I thought, off in the brush, a snap behind the tent, a faint splash from the pond. Nothing close enough to see, but close enough to notice it. It's the wildlife, I told myself, because it always is, right? I listened to the speaker get louder, laughed at the hosts, and drank one more beer, then another. Around 11, I stumbled into my tent and crashed. Didn't even bother killing the fire or turning off the podcast. Didn't even take off my hoodie. I was asleep in seconds. I awoke, however, to pressure on my sleeping bag. It took me a second to understand that it wasn't just me. Something warm was pressing up against me. Heavy, slow-moving, breathing. My first thought was a deer, then a human. I froze. I was still drunk, but I knew something was wrong. The air smelled awful. Wet rot, mildew, decay. I tried to listen, tried not to move, but my pulse was hammering so loud it kind of drowned everything else out. Whoever it was, they were lying right up against my side, thigh to thigh. I could feel every inhale. I didn't really think, I just kind of rolled hard and yanked the zipper, dove out barefoot into the dirt, and sailed right through the tent flap. The fire was embers now. My flashlight beam jerked across the tree line in the tent fabric. No one followed me out. No sound at all except for my own ragged breathing. Okay, I guess maybe I dreamed it. I was drunk, so I passed out and just imagined the whole thing, but holy shit, it was terrifying. Then I took note of something moving behind the light, a soft step in the dry needles. I froze again. I heard another step and then nothing. I checked the immediate area with my flashlight and found nothing, so I quickly decided it was time to go back to bed. I knew I tied on a pretty good one, drank far more than usual, and fell asleep with my tent unzipped. I figured a skunk or a raccoon had found its way in, following the scent of chili and Fritos onto my hands and breath. It made sense in my late-night drunken stupor. When morning finally broke, the world looked normal again. The birds, the sunlight, the calm pond. I laughed to myself. It really must have been a nightmare. And I went to relight the fire for breakfast and froze. My speaker was now sitting on the table instead of hanging up in the tree. My firewood was now stacked in this strange pattern, sticks laid out in this weird formation like somebody else had been arranging them. In fact, everything was moved around to some degree. In the tree line, I saw him. He stood there motionless, watching me. At first, I thought it was the same man from the road that had told me about this very spot. Same age maybe, but this one looked a lot more feral. His beard was long and matted, his hair was a filthy nest. His clothes were nothing but tied strips of garbage bags and torn rags. His eyes looked vacant, dead gray, and he looked like he hadn't spoken to another person in years. Hey! I called out. He didn't even blink. Sir, are you okay out there? Still nothing. He stepped forward, one jerky movement at a time, arms twitching at his sides. I took a step back. He continued to come closer. It felt like I was watching some kind of zombie from a movie. All right, that's close enough. Just stop right there, I shouted. I still didn't get any kind of reaction though. I quickly snatched up the hatchet from the stump. All right, you come any closer and I swear to God. Still nothing, just that blank stare as he continued to march straight for me. In that moment, I realized I might actually have to kill this guy. I ran to the truck and grabbed my pistol from the glove box, fired one round into the dirt, and the shot echoed off all the trees, and that got him to stop. He flinched and then spat into the dirt, then turned his back to me and stood there. Stood still, held frozen solid, just facing away like he was waiting for something to happen. I kept the gun on him for what felt like forever. The guy still wasn't moving, not even swaying. That's when I realized there were footprints in the dirt between us. My campsite was now covered in them. Bare feet, long strides, toes dug deep into the dust. He'd been walking around and through my campsite for a while, maybe even all night. This time I didn't wait for him to move again. I kept my gun trained while I backed away toward the camp, tossing my gear into the truck one piece at a time: tent, cooler, sleeping bag. The whole time he stayed right there at the tree line, back to me. When I went to go grab my pack from the tent, a smell hit me again, that damp chemical human smell. The inside was telling. My blanket pushed aside, sleeping bag twisted, dirt smeared across the floor like something had crawled in it. The clothing and fabric on the tent floor was covered in dark stains, clearly human-shaped, and there was handprints on the side of my sleeping bag. I nearly threw up at the sight. That's what I felt last night. This psycho crawled into my tent and spooned me. I slammed the tailgate shut and got behind the wheel. The old man still hadn't moved. I started the engine, half expecting him to turn around, but he didn't. Stayed there, motionless, that tangle of black plastic rustling in the morning breeze. As I drove off, I caught one last look in the mirror. He was crouching now, really low to the ground, picking through the dirt where I'd been standing. I couldn't even see what he was doing, gathering up things maybe, small bits that I'd left behind, but it looked very, very important to him for some reason. When I reached the main road, I chained the gate behind me and didn't even look back. A ranger told me that there were all kinds of bizarre reports from out there. The land had been part of some kind of condemned federal property. Old mine shafts, chemical dumpings, toxic runoffs. Nobody should have been out there at all. He said the locals call it the basin. He also told me a few people still lived out there, if you call it that. And charming that I got to meet one of them. By August, the Lowveld had gone pretty silent. The grass was brittle and the air was full of dust, and the water holes had shrunk into muddy pits ringed with bones. This was the season when everything starved. Hyenas were thin, giraffes would stick to the deep plains. Even the vultures stayed grounded, conserving what little they had left. I'd been guiding safaris for more than a decade now, but I've never seen the bush this desperate. Predators had started turning on livestock, and the villagers were really scared. 2 weeks ago, a herdsman was taken near the riverbed. The radio chatter was constant: missing goats, missing dogs, missing people. The prides were moving closer to the roads, shadowing vehicles, pacing the horizons. They are notoriously lazy hunters, so when things get hard, they'll kill pretty much anything they can find. It's a harsh reality of being in the desert. That morning, my partner Rory and I had drove out ahead of the client tour, scouting the route toward the dry pans. We didn't speak much. A few miles out, we saw them again. 9 lions, strung along the ridge, not resting in the grass like they should have been, but following along. They'd been doing it for days now. Unsettling, but nothing we hadn't seen before. "They're tracking us," Rory said, glassing up the slope. I nodded. "They're tracking something, but it might not be us." We reached the camp by sunset. No clients tonight, no other guided camps, just us and whatever lurked beyond the firelight. The air dropped fast, hitting the mid-40s by midnight. Somewhere far off, a lion roared, and another answered from the opposite direction. I told Rory to keep his rifle near and his bladder in check. Didn't need any goofy accidents. The tracks that we'd seen at dusk were very fresh. A big male's paw prints led straight toward camp before veering off into the scrub. They were here and didn't care who knew it. That night before turning in, I remember saying, if they're out there, they'll keep to the high grounds. Boy, was I wrong. I woke to pressure on my spine, hot, rhythmic, alive. Not weight like a person, but mass, breathing, and I froze. The canvas behind me had flexed with each exhale, heat radiating through my thermal. Something rumbled through the fabric, deep and steady, like a Mac engine. It took a second to understand what in fact I was feeling. Then my blood turned to ice. There was a lion laying against my tent. I could even feel the purr vibrating through my ribs. The air was smelling some kind of awful, musky and sweet and coppery, like meat left in the sun. I didn't dare move. "Eli," Rory whispered from his tent, voice cracked and shaking. "You awake?" I wanted to kill him for speaking, and for a moment, I felt its claw extend from the pad and into my back and hips. At that moment, I felt like a bit of food at the end of a fork. The lion's breathing then hitched and the weight shifted. The canvas groaned as it rose up. brushing my back and towering. The tent poles creaked, dirt popping beneath the stakes. I didn't need to see it to know. He was standing right there, paws level with my head, only a thin sheet of fabric between us now. My entire body tensed into a knot. My rifle sat 3 feet away. Might as well have been across the continent. It wouldn't have mattered anyway. There were others out there. The lion sniffed, long wet inhalations that pulled air straight out of the tent. His breath rolled through the seams, hot and rank. Then came the scrape of claws, fine faint curls across the ground just beyond my hip. He was marking. I heard the sound of teeth grinding, this low groan. "Rory," I whispered. Almost no sound at all. I don't really know what compelled me to speak. Subconsciously, I think I was trying to speak my final words, maybe. "Help me. Ask and you shall receive." His tent zipper began to descend, and a lion's growl flattened everything outside. Everything went primal after that. Snarls erupted between us, different pitches overlapping. The pride was answering the male. I heard one sprint past my tent, heavy paws tail whipping the canvas. Another hit something metal with a clang. In the morning, we'd see it was the truck. Rory screamed, but it cut off after a second. Realized just how fatal the situation was. Any amount of attention could be death. My heart pounded so hard that it shook my teeth. I could feel the ground vibrating with their movement. One lion roared close enough that it brought tears to my eyes. The sound wasn't volume, it was pressure. My eardrums flexed before it. The tent even seemed to breathe with it, bowing in and then out. It really felt like a movie. Everything told me that I was about to die. Another lion came by, female by the lighter steps, charged through the far side of the camp. I heard her slam against the cooler, the lid popping open, tin cans and plastic scattering around. Then this screeching tear as the claws raked the bin around the campsite. Rory made the mistake of flicking on his headlamp. The beam cut through the wall of my tent, bright white and trembling, and in that slice of light, I saw its shadow, the male's head. It was massive and round, the muzzle pushing the canvas inward. Every whisker impression was visible. His jaws were open, and I saw the silhouette of his teeth now cutting across the fabric, inches from my face. I swear you could see steam rising up from where his breath hit. I stopped breathing entirely. My chest ached in this bad way, eyes still watering. My heartbeat now became the only thing I could hear. He huffed again, this deep, irritated gust that flapped open the canvas against my cheek. Then, out in the dark, a lioness gave this short, sharp grunt, and they all sprang into motion. The male snarled annoyed, tail thudding the ground, then stepped back. The heat peeled away from the tent wall and the outline then vanished. He turned his body, brushing up against the entire length of the canvas as he passed it, his mane rasping like sandpaper. I heard the thud of each paw as he walked towards Rory's tent. "Don't move, man," I whispered. His light went dark, and the only sound the lions were making now was them pacing around us, breathing and tails whipping up against the dust, at least 4 of them, maybe more. The male then froze again, and he made this sound, a deep, chesty snort, and the others went quiet instantly. I pictured them all crouched, eyes reflecting the starlight, paws kneading through my skin, teeth, claws, my blood soaking into the sand. As soon as it started, they just kind of moved off. It wasn't in a panic, just this sudden burst of controlled energy. After a few seconds, we couldn't even hear them anymore. The silence they left behind was worse than the noise. My whole body was now soaked in sweat, freezing against the night. What the hell just happened? After a long time, I heard Rory whisper to me, "You alive?" "Yeah," I croaked. "You?" "I think so." We stayed awake until the sky started to lighten up, rifles in reach, listening for a return that never came. By sunrise, the camp looked like it had survived some kind of storm. The fire pit was scattered with paw prints, lapping in every single direction. The cooler lay tipped on its side, lid torn off, edges shredded. My tent sagged from where that lion had leaned on it, canvas slick with dew and greasy film of some kind. I stepped outside and felt the cold air hit my face. It was quite sobering. The horizon glowed pale and gold. It felt like a victory. Rory then came out after me, eyes hollow. Neither of us spoke. The prints were everywhere, some bigger than dinner plates, deep enough to hold shadows. You could see where the male had roamed, where the ladies had prowled, and where another had been pacing Rory's tent. It wasn't a visit, It was some kind of inspection. They could have easily taken us, he muttered. I nodded, no need for another comment. The radio crackled in the dirt below the table crate, hissing static. I turned the dial with numb fingers until a voice cut through, urgent and breathless, full of noise.
Repeat, 1 confirmed fatality in Sekwan village. Male adult, attacked during the night.
Rory and I locked eyes. The radio kept talking.
Livestock pen destroyed, 2 goats taken. Tracks indicate a pride, at least 6 strong, moving southwest.
Southwest, away from us. I lowered the radio. The bush went quiet again, but it felt more alive, like anything could step out of that high grass. They were hunting, Rory said to me. Consider yourself lucky. He frowned, nodding. I looked out across the open plain, and from where we stood, you could see the ridgeline, faint tracks etching into the dust. On the other side was a town where a man had now died, a place where we took our savaris for supplies on a regular basis. For whatever reason that night, the lions didn't kill us, and I accepted that without question. What else could I really do? The plains are super unforgiving out here. Survival is moving on from victories, because almost all of them are temporary. I've spent most of my life looking down a steel throat. My old man worked stations, switches, paperwork, yelling at dumb conductors. I went the other direction. I wanted the cab. I wanted the feeling of 100 cars hooked up behind me, rolling throughout the dark. I hired on in the 90s, when a crew still felt like a crew, 5 guys easy, sometimes more than that. By the early 2000s, they'd whittled us down to 3 on most of the runs. Corporate efficiency, do more with less, automation. These days, crews are just 2 people now, and a whole lot of robotic assistance. That winter run was across Colorado, grain hoppers and tankers, a long snake of freight behind us, pushing empty across the country where the stations are more suggestion than actual reality. You get these stretches out there where it feels like the tracks are the only thing human beings ever built. No houses, no farm lights, just snow hills, the cold, and the endless dark on all sides of you. It was me in the lead unit, my engineer Rick, and a brakeman named Torres riding the second engine. Good dudes. We'd run together enough that the silence between us felt okay, not awkward or even questionable. We knew each other's habits and each other's tells. That stuff kind of matters when something looks wrong. Lets you know if you should react or not. When you work a train with somebody you don't know, you're constantly waiting for them to do something wrong and derail the whole machine. I remember this night in particular very well. The cab heater only half worked and it warmed the other side. The snow blew in loose sheets instead of a full whiteout. The radio would hiss and pop whenever we heard a clear cut and rolled back out into open country. It was cold enough that the rails sang underneath us. If you hung your head out the window, it would literally rattle your teeth. We were 3 hours into the rides when I saw the first drops. I had a paperback open on my knee, one eye on the gauges out of habit. I lifted the binoculars and swept the track ahead of me. Headlights carved a tunnel through the snow. Right there between the rails, something dark crossed the ballast. At first I assumed coyote, some kind of roadkill, something fairly normal. Then we roll over it and I see the red. I leaned toward the glass and took another look. The smear we hit was not oil, it was blood. Fresh, dark, and right between the rails. Puddles from something moving down the tracks now. It's all along the snowbanks, just off from the train. We keep on rolling and I twist in my seat to watch it pass by, then pick up the radio. Torres, you catching that trail? Static, and then his voice came from the rear unit.
Yeah, looks like blood. A lot of it.
Rick at the controls beside me lets off the throttle a little bit. Could be a gut-shot deer, he says. Yeah, maybe, I return back, but I've never seen one run the ties with its guts falling out. The droplets get bigger, then they stop being droplets at all, just a continuous smear that stains the ballast, cutting a red line across the snowbank. I grab my binoculars again and scan forward. A shape sits off the right side of the right-of-way, cloth heavy, and as we approach, it becomes recognizable. There's a jacket up ahead, I say. Rick sees it at the same moment. Damn. It's a winter parka thrown open, half buried in the snow. The entire piece of clothing is soaked with more blood. I key the mic. Dispatch, this is 731. We got a blood trail at least a half a mile long, plus discarded clothing, heavy bleeding, no obstructions to track. Over. Dispatch comes back nice and calm.
Copy 731. Continue on. Sheriff's office notified. Report additional items as found. Keep an eye on the track.
Will do. I hang the mic. The cab around me feels tighter now, like the train has shrunk a little bit around me. Then the next items show up. Right rail, I say. 2 socks, both stained, one torn neatly in half. A few hundred yards later, a balled-up t-shirt drags along the ballast, frozen stiff. It slaps the side of the rail as we pass it. Torres then radios in again.
You ever see a deer take its clothes off, boss?
I don't laugh. Eyes open. Look for track obstruction. The blood then continues uninterrupted. Too much for an animal. Too irregular for a dragged body. Someone was moving on foot. I jot the nearest mile marker down and scan again. Another patch of clothes then shows up. Jeans caught on a rock. The legs are knotted together. The thighs are darkened from waist to knee. Rick mutters something about an accident under his breath. This doesn't match a fall, I say. If somebody fell off a train, we'd see one single impact, not all this trailing carnage. It could have been running the right of way, Torres said. People do stupid shit out here. Running and shedding clothes? I ask. In this cold? I lift the binoculars. The lamps then catch something further up ahead. Small, scattered white shapes directly on the ties. Not snow, bandages. Dozens of them. Some rolled, some torn apart, stuck to the rails like they've been dropped in a hurry. Bandages ahead, I say. Track still clear. Copy, Rick says. He straightens up and his hands are firm on the controls. The train continues to hum underneath us. Every 20 or 30 yards, another cloth scrap just appears. A glove, another t-shirt torn and covered with blood. I key up again. Dispatch, additional note, we're seeing medical materials, bandages, gauze, directly on the track itself.
Copy 731. Sheriff's units are en route to Route Station 83. Continue unless obstructed.
The curve ahead rises on the right, a long bend around the low rock formation that we passed 100 times over. I look over and tell Rick, ease it down, let's give ourselves a look. He throttles back another notch, not enough to cause issues with the air in the line, but enough for me to feel the change. The nose dips slightly into that curve. I brace myself, binoculars up. These bandages get thicker, bunched up now in these small piles. Something else is sitting near them, a boot. Just one, sole up. The leather is chewed and stiff. Torres then comes over the radio.
Boss, whatever happened here, they didn't walk away clean. There's gotta be a body out here.
Stay sharp, I respond back. We haven't seen anybody yet. We roll a little further into the curve and then the world shifts. A steep rock face rises to our right. About halfway up its shelf, a natural ledge wide enough for a couple of trucks to park side by side. The snow atop it is disturbed, not melted, not wind patterns, foot traffic. Rick, I say, look right. He does and his hand then freezes on the throttle. There's a man sitting on the ledge. He's leaned up against the rock, legs stretched out, cigarette smoke drifting from his mouth. His coat is gone. His shirt is torn at the sleeves. His left arm is wrapped up in bloody bandages from wrist to elbow. Fresh trails of blood are out from underneath them, bright as paint. He lifts his cigarette like he's greeting us, this casual wave. No panic, no call for help, just a wave. Jesus, Rick says. The train then thunders past him, and I can't look away. The man's face is raw, weathered, streaked with dirt and dried blood. His eyes follow us the whole way around that curve. I grab the radio. Dispatch, we have a live party on the right side ledge at the curve before RS-83. Male injured, appears conscious.
Do you require emergency stop?
I watch the man fade behind us sitting and watching, cigarette ember still glowing. No, I say. Track is clear, continue. We move into open country. The blood trail finally disappears behind us and Torres comes on again.
Boss, did he wave at you?
Yeah, I say back. And Rick doesn't speak for a long time. Nobody does. For a while, none of us say anything. The train settles back into its usual noise, but the cab feels different now, like we were passing through a vacuum. I keep writing notes because it's something that I do. Male on ridge, heavy bleeding, conscious, no distress signal. Friendly? Dispatch calls in again.
713 sheriff's units are arriving at RS-83. Confirm last sighting.
I read the coordinates back to him.
Affirmative. Injured male on the shelf above the curve. Track clear.
Copy. Continue as planned. I hang up and Rick keeps his eyes on the rails, but I can tell his mind is still back at that curve. Torres remains quiet in the second unit. A few miles later, the lines open up into a long prairie. Snow and nothing else. No blood, no clothing, just empty country around us. Torres breaks the silence.
You think he wanted us to see him?
He saw our lights. He could hear us from at least a mile off, I say. Hard to say what his goal actually was. He didn't seem like he needed help though, right? I can't argue. The man on the ridge wasn't panicking. He was waving or maybe trying to flag us down. He looked completely aware, and that's the best word I have for it. Rick finally speaks up. Guy loses that much blood and sits up smoking in that temperature? He needed help and probably didn't even realize it. The police will help him. They have to. I shrug. Yeah, that's the best case. What were we gonna do for him? But even as I say that, I know it doesn't answer anything. We're not doctors. We aren't prepared for a fatally bleeding stranger. We hit our checkpoints, finish the run, and swap crews. Before Torres climbs down, he stops in the doorway and says to me, "Just so I know, he was really there, right?" "Yeah," I tell him. Rick nods and all three of us confirm. Later that morning, dispatch forwards over a short sheriff's report. Blood trail confirmed, clothing collected, medical bandages found, no subject located, search ongoing. And it's the last line that sticks with me. 5 days later, when I'm back on shift, I ask dispatch if any update ever came in. He scrolls and squints at his monitor. Sheriff closed it out," he says. "Said the guy probably moved on before deputies got there. Might have found a road or a ranch house. Happens more often than you think. A lot of vagrants out that way." I thanked him, but that explanation doesn't tell me anything. The man we saw was not wandering or confused. He'd left miles and miles of blood and clothing behind him, patched himself up repeatedly. He'd made it to a high ledge in freezing weather and just sat there waiting for something. Maybe us. Who the hell knows? He acknowledged us and that was it. No shout, no gesture for help, just a wave like the whole situation was completely normal. It made me think we saw some kind of ghost out from the Old West. And every time I've run that stretch ever since, I look toward that shelf. I never see anybody there, but I still check. It's automatic. My new normal. Whatever the hell happened out there didn't end neatly. Someone survived long enough to leave half themselves along the right-of-way and sit upright watching a freight train pass. And the sheriffs never found him. I was 21 the winter that I almost died. I'd left Phoenix before dawn, cocky and under-caffeinated, driving a 99 Corolla that rattled every time I took it over 60. I was heading east through the high desert, cutting across northern New Mexico toward Texas. Nice, long, empty highways. I'd done that route twice before in the summer, when the worst thing that you had to worry about was a shredded tire or a jackrabbit. The weather app said it was clear, cold with a little light wind. Nothing about the sky closing in on me. Hell, this was the Southwest. Storms and blizzards aren't really our thing out here, so I didn't give it any thought. But by mid-morning, the world around me had gone gray. At first, it was just a haze on the horizon, like some dust coming up. Then the light started to dim. The first flakes hit my windshield, slow, lazy, and pretty, actually. I remember thinking, snow, that's different. I turned on my wipers and kept my foot steady on the gas. 10 minutes later, those flakes were the size of quarters. They slapped the glass in wet bursts, smearing any clear vision that I had. My wipers were crap, rubber peeling, leaving these icy streaks. The defroster fought the cold and was easily losing. A film began to creep up on the inside of the glass, so I wiped it with my sleeve, smearing it more in the process. As you can imagine, this was a problem. Now, I should have turned around then. I should have taken the last exit 20 miles back, but I was 21, broke and stubborn, halfway between where I'd been and where I needed to go. I gripped the wheel tighter and told myself to quit being so dramatic. I was already in New Mexico. I couldn't just flip a switch. Next, the wind kind of rose up out of nowhere. It shoved my little car in these hard, unpredictable gusts. Snow rolled across the asphalt in little waves, filling the ruts left by the previous trucks. My tires were bald as cue balls, losing grip every few seconds. Little slips would jolt my heart right into my throat. "Stay straight," I muttered. "Just stay straight." But the storm continued to thicken up. The horizon now vanished. The sky, the road, and all the fields melted into the same white blur. The world around me shrank into a weak swing of my headlights and the faint shimmer of lane lines already half buried under fresh snow. But I kept driving. Minutes turned into eternity. My hands were aching from gripping the wheel so hard. I dropped my speed to 30, then to 20, then whatever felt slow enough not to die and fast enough not to get stranded. If I got stuck out here, there would be no getting out. There's no other cars, no other headlights, no taillights, just white, falling, swirling, drifting across that asphalt in front of me. The road was not plowed. 2 narrow trenches ran down the middle where trucks had carved their way throughout earlier. On the other side, snow was piling up like walls. Any small drift that I hit tried to drag the Corolla sideways. My bald tires were not going to win any fights. "Come on, don't overcorrect," I whispered to myself. My dad used to say it every winter. "You jerk the wheel, you die." A hard gust then shoved my car. I slid half a lane before I finally caught it, and for a moment, the road vanished completely, swallowed up by that storm. I eased off the gas and steered the car back into the trench. My heart hammering so loud, my chest started to hurt. I barely took a breath, and under my coat, I was beginning to sweat. Time got strange, slow. The heater hummed but almost did nothing for the interior. The windshield continued to fog, perhaps from my own frantic breathing. I didn't even bother smearing it again. My phone, of course, showed no service. The storm had indeed swallowed everything now. Then I took note of lights, 2 faint blurs in the rear view, growing brighter. Relief shot throughout me. A plow. It had to be, right? I slowed a little more, planning to let it pass so I could just follow its tracks. My shoulders finally loosened up. Then the lights started ripping. I checked my speed, 25. The headlights grew until they flooded the mirror. I flipped it into night mode. It was still very blinding though. Okay, just go around me, what the hell? But instead the lights locked onto me. I couldn't tell exactly how close they were, but my gut said it was only inches. The glare washed out everything. Snow lit up and vanished into the beams, like sparks hitting a furnace. The truck finally swung left. When I saw it through the side window, tall and heavy, plowing through the snow like it wasn't even there. When it reached my window, I turned my head. It wasn't a plow. A lifted white Chevy Silverado, caked in ice and mud, these off-road tires, a bed full of lumber held down with loose ratchet straps. No company markings, no reason to be out here in this storm. The passenger's window was halfway down. His arm rested on the edge of the door, bare and freezing in the wind. A faded tattoo wound across his forearm. Something faded that I couldn't quite make out. I couldn't see the driver, just a silhouette. They both turned and looked at me. Those pale blue eyes locked on me, washed out and empty. Not curiosity or recognition, just this flat stare. We drove side by side for a few seconds, the wind continuing to howl around us. Then he drifted toward me, the passenger smiling like a complete psycho. Not a sudden swerve, more like this slow push. His fender slid closer to my mirror. I eased over to the right, but the shoulder was nothing but deep, uneven mounds of snow. The tire hit one and pulled hard. No, no, no. I corrected left, and he drifted with me. Our lanes became one thin strip of asphalt. His massive truck owned most of it too. The Chevy's side loomed so close that I could see rust along the bottom of the doors. My mirror started to rattle. "Just pass me, please," I said aloud. But he didn't. He eased in again, then backed off like he was testing the boundaries, seeing how close he could get without actually making any contact. The wheel twitched as I hit a patch of ice. I steadied my car again. My mouth was dry as I mulled over my options. Then his engine roared beside me. The Chevy pushed ahead a few feet, then dropped back beside me again. The man did not break eye contact the whole time. He lifted his hand off the door and pointed one finger straight at me. Then he slowly turned his hand sideways and pushed it through the air. "Get off the road." I shook my head without meaning to. No way. The truck drifted over again, closer this time. close enough that I heard the whine of his tires in the snow. My car skidded right. I fought it, kept it on the only strip of pavement that was left, but it kept leaning, and I was running out of road. He dropped back behind me, and for a second I thought maybe this was all over. He'd finally gotten bored, hopefully. Or maybe the storm made him rethink whatever the hell game he was playing with me. But then, that first nudge hit the back of my car, soft, almost gentle, like somebody bumping a foot up against the rear bumper. Then he hit the fucking gas. The Corolla jerked forward, tires slipping. My breath caught as the wheel became useless now in my hands. Oh, don't do this. Another nudge, harder this time. The truck's headlights filled my mirrors, white blinding, swallowing the entire back half of the car. Snow whipped between us, horizontal, driven by the storm and our speed, 40, maybe 50. I didn't dare look. I tapped the brakes. The Corolla fishtailed, and behind me the truck surged forward and bumped me again, keeping me going the speed that he wanted me to. I tried the brakes again and smelled smoke immediately. I wasn't driving anymore. I was being pushed. The steering wheel vibrated underneath my palms. Every small turn was meaningless. The car wanted to slide, and the storm wanted to bury me. He wanted whatever he wanted. I still don't know to this day. His engine growled behind me, rising and falling like an oversized heartbeat. Then he began to swing the truck side to side, letting his bumper tap my rear fenders, left, then right, little flicks of force that almost sent me spinning. I fought each and every one, hands locked, breath tight. I'm gonna make it through this. Another tap came, harder. The back of my car slid left and I corrected. He hit the right side. I corrected again, slower this time, because the wheel wasn't answering like it should have been. Tires skimming across hidden ice, road turning into glass underneath me. Stop! I screamed. But the next hit was not gentle. It slammed into the left fender and the Corolla just gave up. The back end spun. My world twisted in front of me. Headlights, snow, darkness. Headlights, snow. The tires screamed with every rotation. I tried to steer into the spin, but the car had no grip, no fight, no chance. The ditch then rushed toward me, white, huge, and waiting. I closed my eyes during that final spin out, and my car crashed with this muffled thud. My head snapped forward, the seatbelt locked and crushed my throat. Snow exploded around the car, covering the windows in the thick layer of white. The engine coughed and then suddenly died. And then for a moment after that, everything was silent. The truck roared past me. As it did, I heard a man yell something that I couldn't quite make out, followed by a bottle bursting against the roof, showering the car in a beer that froze before it could even slide down outside the car. He never slowed, he never checked to see if I was alive, just tore off into the whiteout and vanished. I sat there shaking until the adrenaline finally wore off, my phone finally finding this flicker of service. I called 911 and gave them nothing but guesses about where I was. It took an hour for the officers to come and the tow truck to reach me. The cop checked me over, listened to my story, and swept the highway for that Chevy. To my knowledge, they never found it, of course. He said the locals like to drive crazy during the storms, sometimes messing with pass-through traffic. And I guess it's just my lucky day. I've been on the road for 12 hours straight, riding the line between exhaustion and hallucination when I first saw him. A lone figure on the shoulder, half illuminated by my high beams, thumb hanging out like he'd been carved into the desert night. The highway was nothing but a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the scrub and the rock. No towns for miles. No reason for anybody to be out here. My first instinct was to keep driving. I've been warned far too many times. Don't pick up hitchhikers. But my guilt has a way of working its claws in. The longer I look at the figure shrinking in my rear view, the more it felt like I just left a body on the roadside. I don't know why I slowed, but I did. Tires humming against the asphalt as I pulled off onto the shoulder, gravel popping under the weight of my car. He jogged up, lanky and wiry, maybe in his mid-30s. Dirty jeans, canvas jacket, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. When he opened up the door, I caught the sour smell of somebody who hadn't showered in definitely a few days, maybe more. He slid in without another word, clutching a ragged backpack up against his chest like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth. "Thanks," he muttered. "No problem," I said, putting us back on the road. "Where are you heading?" He glanced out the window, eyes scanning the darkness. "Gas station, just the next one." Long way to be walking, I said, trying to keep the mood light. Lucky I came through, huh? He didn't laugh, he didn't even smile, he just kept staring off into the black desert. I figured maybe he was shy or strung out or maybe both. But a few miles later, I heard him muttering under his breath. Some kind of chant maybe. I looked over and saw his lips moving, eyes fixed on the side mirror. "You okay over there?" I asked. He blinked. "We're fine," he said. "Just keep driving. Don't slow down." That sank into me. Not the kind of thing you want to hear at 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere with a stranger riding shotgun. "Don't slow down?" I asked. "They'll catch up if you do." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was telling me water was wet or the sky was blue. I gave him a nervous laugh back. Who's gonna catch up?" But he didn't answer, just hugged that backpack tighter and kept looking out the window. I checked the mirror myself and my stomach nodded. A pair of headlights distant, but they were gaining. I've been alone on the road for over an hour now, not a single car. Now suddenly there was somebody behind us. "That a friend of yours?" I asked. "No," he responded. "Just drive." I pressed the accelerator a little harder, engine whining as the speedometer climbed. The headlights behind us matched it perfectly. The car behind us stuck like glue. Every time I eased off the gas, its headlights swelled bigger in the mirror. When I pushed the pedal, it would match me, keeping just enough distance to make sure that my skin would crawl. I gripped the wheel tighter, my mouth was getting dry, while a stranger beside me muttered and clutched his backpack. "All right, you gonna tell me what's going on?" I snapped. His voice dropped. "They followed me, I got away, but they don't let people go. Nobody gets out, not for free." "Okay, what do you mean they?" Then he turned to me, face pale in the glow from the dash. "Just keep driving." That wasn't an answer, at least not good enough for me. I tried telling myself it was a coincidence, that maybe it was just another innocent driver heading the same direction, but deep down, I think I knew better. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a pursuit. I flicked the headlights to high, leaning into the speed, 80, 85, 90. My tires buzzing against the asphalt, a low howl that made it feel like the car could lift off the road at any second. The headlights behind us grew smaller, then steadied, still keeping pace. "You're not gonna stop," that guy whispered. "Not till they have me back." I shot him another glance. His hands were trembling as they were clamped still over that backpack. What the hell's in there? Proof. His eyes flashed in the dark. Enough to ruin them. They can't let it get out. My blood iced over. I wanted to press for more, but there was a part of me that already knew the truth was probably uglier than I could actually stomach. Whoever these people were, they weren't just pissed off friends chasing down a runaway. It smelled bigger, dirtier. The road sign loomed up ahead of us, green letters shining gas, 15 miles. I clenched my jaw. 15 miles might as well have been 100 at this point. The car behind continued to inch closer, the glare of its high beams flooding my mirrors until I couldn't see a damn thing. The engine roared as it closed the gap. "Hold on," I barked over at him. They rammed us. Just a kiss at first. I shuddered through the frame of my car, enough to make the hitchhiker yelp. Then again a little harder, shoving us forward. My teeth rattled. I swerved, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me alive. "They're gonna force us off the road," he shouted. He was probably right, but all I could do was just brace for it. The highway curved left and I took it fast, the tires screaming against the pavement. The other car hung back for a breath, then lunged again, its headlights searing into my vision. I thought about letting him out, about slamming the brakes and tossing that stranger back on the road, handing him over to whatever nightmare he brought into my passenger seat. But I couldn't. It was too late for that now. I was in it. And then, blessed sight, the faint glow of lights on the horizon. The gas station. I floored it, praying the car wouldn't spin out before we actually made it. The station sat lonely in this island in the desert, buzzing neon signs and a couple of flickering lamps. No other cars, no other sign of life, just 4 pumps and a greasy little building squatting under the weight of the night. I slammed quickly into the lot, brakes damn near smoking. the smell of burnt rubber choking out in the air. The hitchhiker was out before we'd even fully stopped, immediately bolting for the door. I shouted at him to wait, but he was already gone, backpack slamming against his side as he sprinted inside. The other car peeled in behind us, engine growling, headlights snapping off, and for the first time I saw the shape of it, this old black sedan, windows tinted dark. The doors creaked open in unison. Two men then stepped out, big blocky shoulders, work boots hitting the concrete with slow, heavy steps. They didn't rush. Their confidence almost made my stomach turn again. One of them looked straight at me, a dead stare that pinned me to the seat. He then turned and followed that hitchhiker into the gas station. The other stayed outside, leaning up against the car, like a watchman. Now, I should have just driven off. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to floor it, get out of there, leave this stranger to whatever the hell he'd signed up for, but I sat there, frozen, my breath fogging up the windshield. My curiosity ended up being stronger than my fear, and maybe, just maybe, my guilt too. Through the door of the gas station, I could see the hitchhiker at the counter, shouting at the weary clerk. The man outside pulled something from his jacket, tucking it close to his leg. It had to be a gun. Now that broke the spell. I shoved my door open and staggered inside. My voice cracked. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" The one by the car turned his head slowly, like he couldn't believe I was dumb enough to step out. "Go home," he said, calm and quiet, the kind of voice that promised you didn't really want to hear it twice. But it was already too late. Inside the station, the hitchhiker ripped open his backpack, spilling out these papers and photos across the counter. The clerk's eyes went wide. He said something frantic I couldn't quite hear through the glass. Then the second man stormed in, shoving the man against the shelves. A soda display crashed to the floor, cans rolled everywhere. The hitchhiker's voice broke through the chaos, desperate. "Call the cops. Don't let them take me back." And for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd actually be saved. Then the man with the gun raised it, leveled it, and everything froze. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, could only watch as the desert night pressed in around us. The ugly truth of what I'd stumbled into finally bared its teeth. The moment stretched like it was caught in amber, my eyes locked on the barrel of that gun, the way it glinted under those lights. The hitchhiker froze, one arm still clutching the counter, his mouth hanging open mid-plea. I wanted to move, I wanted to do something, yell, rush in, knock the gun aside like in the movies, but I was rooted to the pavement, hands trembling uselessly at my side. The man outside, the watchman, never even looked away from me. He didn't need to say another word. The message was carved in stone. Stay put or join him. A thunderclap cracked inside the station. The clerk screamed. The hitchhiker dropped like his strings had been cut, a smear of red blooming across the tile. Papers scattered across the floor, photos of men in uniforms, documents stamped with logos that I couldn't quite read from where I was. Evidence, at least that's what he said. Evidence that would obviously never leave that counter. The shooter knelt, grabbed the backpack, stuffed the scattered proof back inside with cold efficiency, then stood and calmly strode for the door. The clerk stood frozen behind the register, hands covering her mouth, eyes huge. Our gazes locked for a quick second, and I'll never forget that look. She knew she just witnessed something that she would never unsee. The two men stepped back out into the night, one carrying the backpack, the other wiping his hands across his jacket, and then tossed another glance at me, almost like I was less than dirt. They got back in the sedan, doors shut with muffled thuds. The engine purred to life, then they were gone, taillights shrinking back out on that black highway, just like that. I stumbled inside. The clerk was shaking, tears streaking down her cheeks, staring at the body on the floor. We need to call somebody," I stammered out. "The cops?" She shook her head violently, eyes still really wild. "No, you don't understand. You didn't see them. You didn't see them." "But he's dead." She grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt, nails digging deep. "Go, right now. Leave before they come back. Forget that you were ever here." I yanked free, but the look in her eyes was really enough. Terror, not of me, not even of the dead man bleeding in her linoleum, but of whoever those men really worked for. I backed out of the station. My car sat under those buzzing lights, engine still warm, door hanging open. I climbed back inside. The road ahead was empty again, my headlights carving out a narrow path, and I drove it like a man possessed, half expecting to see those same red taillights to reappear in my mirror now at any second. But they didn't. The highway gave me nothing but silence and distance. Hours later, when I finally hit the outskirts of the next town, I pulled into a diner lot and sat there until dawn, watching the sun crawl up over the desert. I called the police. How could I not? I made a report over the phone, and the dispatcher knew exactly what I was talking about. An officer met me at the diner an hour later to get some more details from me. It was some kind of ongoing murder investigation. I told him everything, especially about how the clerk told me to go. They said they were taking extra time to look into her as well. The vibe I got was that she was some kind of drug dealer of some kind, and the hitcher was involved with her. The cop left, and I was all alone. So I just sat there, silently, until the smell of coffee drifted out of the parking lot and the world started moving again like nothing had happened. And that's when I realized, whatever that man had been running from, it wasn't just his nightmare. He handed me a piece of it the second I let him into my car. We'd been on the road for 6 hours when I saw her. The four of us all packed into Josh's beat-up old Corolla, windows fogged from our breath, the smell of stale fries and gas station coffee turning the cabin quickly sour. College road trips always sounded better than they actually were. On paper, it was supposed to be freedom, music, inside jokes, but in reality, it was endless stretches of asphalt, cramped legs, and everybody getting irritable in waves. The highway dipped through a long stretch of pine, then spat us out by this old railroad crossing. And that's where she stood. A girl barefoot in the gravel, one arm hugging her stomach, the other stuck out half-heartedly in the universal pick-me-up gesture. Torn jeans, a hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair knotted into greasy ropes. Josh was slowing down before anybody could say a word. Dude, what are you doing?" I asked him. "What? She looks like she needs help." He squinted through the windshield. "It's freezing out there." I don't care if it's freezing, man. This is how horror movies start." Sarah leaned forward from the back seat, voiced soft. "Come on, she actually looks our age. Would you want to be left out here?" I'll admit that shut me up because no, I wouldn't, and I knew if I was stranded, I'd pray somebody with a shred of compassion would stop for me too. So Josh pulled over. The girl walked up, quite hesitant at first, then faster when she realized we weren't driving off. She bent down and peered into the window. Up close, she looked even worse. Her lips were pale, nose was red, eyes glassy with clear exhaustion. "You headed into town?" she asked. Her voice was rough, like she'd been screaming or crying recently. "Yeah," Josh said. "Hop in." She slid in the middle of the back seat, pressing close to Sarah. She smelled like sweat and dirt, that kind of dirty you can't really fake. She hugged herself tight and kept her eyes down. "Thanks," she whispered. "I just need a ride away from here." Nobody spoke for a moment. The only sound was the heater rattling weakly, trying to push back the chill. Finally, I cleared my throat. So what are you doing out here?" Her shoulders tensed. "Running." Running from what?" "It doesn't matter." She glanced up. The look in her eyes made me shut my mouth. It was wide, alert, scanning each of us like she was calculating whether we were a bigger threat than whatever she'd escaped from. Josh turned the music down. "Where do you want us to drop you off?" "Just keep driving," she said. "I'll tell you when." The four of us kind of exchanged confused looks, and nobody argued. I kept staring out the window as the pines thickened again, pressing close to the road. My stomach knotted. Something about the way she said running, not walking, not leaving, but running. It really was sticking with me. I didn't know it then, but letting her into the car meant that we'd already crossed a line that we could no longer come back from. The girl really didn't say much after that. She just stared out the window, hands buried deep in the sleeves of her hoodie, rocking slightly. Every once in a while, Sarah would try to strike up some kind of conversation. "Where are you from? Do you need to call somebody?" But the girl's answers were clipped and clearly evasive. Josh kept glancing at me in the passenger seat, his expression saying what we both were thinking. maybe picking her up hadn't been such a great idea, but none of us had the guts to actually say it out loud. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No towns, no lights, just the highway. I finally turned around, trying to sound casual. "You said you needed a ride into town, right? Which town?" She blinked, like she hadn't really thought that far ahead. "Just keep going. I'll know when." I didn't like that answer. "Look, we can drop you off at a gas station or a diner or something, somewhere safe." Her eyes flicked to mine, very cold-like. "I said, I'll tell you when." The way she said that sent a ripple through the car. Sarah leaned back, folding her arms. Evan, who'd been quiet the whole trip, finally muttered, "Creepy." Josh cleared his throat. "All right, we're not gonna go too far off route though. We still got a long drive ahead of us." That's when she spoke up again. "There's a shortcut up ahead. Turn right at the next dirt road." I frowned. Okay, shortcut to where exactly?" "To town." Her lips twitched into something that might have been a smile, though it never really reached her eyes. Josh's hands tightened on the wheel. I could see the hesitation clearly on him, but he was always too trusting in people. "All right, I guess if it's quicker." The dirt road appeared out of the darkness, a thin strip vanishing into heavy woods. Josh turned onto it. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. The headlights cut this narrow tunnel through the trees. Every nerve in my body was screaming that this is wrong. This isn't what we should be doing. We hadn't passed another car in an hour, and now we're leaving the only highway that actually might lead to somewhere. But the girl just leaned back in her seat, finally looking relaxed, and that really scared me more than anything else. "See?" she said. "Told you." The deeper we went, the worse it continued to feel, though. No houses, no mailboxes, just trees and blackness. The dirt road narrowed rougher with every bend, until it felt less like a road now and more like a trail. Evan leaned forward between the seats. "Dude, this is not a shortcut. There's no way." Josh slowed down a little. "How much further?" "Not far," the girl responded back. I twisted in my seat to face her again. "Look, I don't really know what's going on, but this doesn't feel right. Where exactly are you taking us?" "Almost there." Again, the way she talks, the way she said everything, it was really starting to terrify me. And then the first set of headlights appeared off in the trees to the left, half hidden, then another on the right. Parked vehicles, their shapes hulking in the dark. A pickup, an SUV, another car. My chest went cold. "Josh," I said, "turn around now." Before he could do much, the figures stepped out of the trees, 3, 4, 5 of them, shadows moving up the road, lit up in the headlights. Men, big men, their faces cast in shadow, but their postures said everything we needed to know. They'd been waiting for us. Josh slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, dust clouding the beams. The girl straightened up, suddenly more calm and collected. She looked at us, finally meeting each of our eyes in turn. "Hey, thanks for the ride," she said. The doors opened and the men started toward us, slow and steady. One had a flashlight. Another held something heavier, maybe a pipe, maybe a bat. My stomach immediately flipped. Sarah gasped out loud. "Oh my God." Evan swore under his breath. "She set us up. She fucking set us up." Josh fumbled for reverse, tires spinning as the car jerked backwards. The men then surged forward, shouting, hands pounding on the hood. One yanked at the driver's handle. Another pounded the glass by my head. "Go, go!" I screamed. Josh floored it. The Corolla jolted backward, swerving off the road and then into a ditch. The bumper slammed hard in the dirt, and the tires squealed as he fought for the wheel. One of the men slipped in front of us, and Josh swerved again, missing him only by inches. The girl didn't move. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, watching us like we were nothing more than a delivery that had arrived early. We hit the dirt road again, fishtailing. The men shouted, one of them running after us for a few yards before fading off into the dark. The headlights of the parked vehicle snapped on, and the engines roared to life. "They're coming," Sarah said. I twisted in my seat. Sure enough, beams of lights were cutting through the dust, bearing down fast. Josh was white-knuckling the wheel. "Hold on," he barked. The Corolla screamed down the trail, bouncing over ruts, barely holding together. The trees whipped past in a blur. My heart was currently in my throat, waiting for the moment one of those bigger trucks to ram us from behind, flip us back into a ditch. But somehow, by some miracle, we burst back out onto the highway. The other vehicles didn't seem to be following either. We drove in silence, every one of us heaving for breath, hearts pounding like war drums. Nobody dared to speak, not even Sarah this time. Finally, I turned around, and the back seat was empty. The girl was gone. The silence in the car was heavier than anything I've ever felt. All 4 doors were locked. Engine was screaming down a highway, but the space between Sarah was now empty. The hoodie, the bare feet, the sour smell, gone, like she'd never even been there. Josh's voice cracked. "Where the fuck did she go?" "She was just right," Sarah stammered out, spinning around, her hand patting the seat like the girl might have slipped under it somehow. "She was just here." "No fucking way," Evan muttered, shaking his head. His face was ghost white. "No way. She got out back there. She must have, when the guys were on us." But I was watching. I saw her sitting perfectly still, hands folded. She hadn't moved a muscle when we tore out of that trap. There hadn't been time for her to jump out. No chance she could have slipped free without us noticing it. But she must have, right? "Look, it doesn't matter how, she's gone now, and we need to keep driving." Josh didn't argue with me. He pushed the car a little harder. None of us looked back, terrified we'd see those headlights flaring up in the distance again. It wasn't until nearly an hour later, when the lights of a real town finally glowed on the horizon, that anybody spoke up. Sarah's voice was barely audible. She wasn't running from anyone. And we all know she was right. She didn't need saving. She'd been bait, dangled out there like meat on a hook, waiting for some bleeding heart idiot to scoop her up and deliver her straight to the jaws of whatever the hell operation those men were running. We rolled into town just after dawn, pulling into a diner lot like survivors. We didn't even go inside, we just sat there, faces pale, eyes empty. I kept thinking about her last words when she was in the car. Almost there. She hadn't been talking about any town. She'd been talking about the trap, and we'd driven her right to it. Even now, years later, when I pass a lone hitchhiker on some forgotten back road, I grip the wheel and keep driving because I know better. Some people aren't running from danger. Some people are the danger. I always took the shortcut. Everybody kept telling me that I was stupid, that if I just stuck to the main street, I'd be fine. The lights were bright and people were always around, even at midnight, and the cops made their presence known. But Main Street added 10 minutes to my walk home, and after bartending for 7 hours, my legs would feel like bricks. 10 minutes was 10 minutes too long for me. The alley was narrow and crooked, tucked between 2 old brick apartment buildings and a row of boarded up shops. Half the bulbs in the rusted fixtures overhead had long since blown, leaving these big gaps of shadow. The pavement was cracked and littered with broken glass, old beer cans, and the kind of trash that told you nobody really gave a damn about this part of town. It always smelled like piss and rotting garbage, but I was used to it. After enough nights dragging myself home at 2 a.m, this place became routine for me. On this night in particular, though, something was different. It was a Tuesday in late August, humid as hell. The bar hadn't really been busy, but I stayed late, cleaning up because the other bartender had bailed early. By the time I locked up, the streets were dead quiet. Even Main Street was empty except for a couple of taxis cruising slowly. The city had that strange hollow silence that made everything feel like I was walking through a stage set after the actors had already gone home. I crossed the corner and slipped into the alley, my sneakers crunching over the gravel, the sound bouncing back at me off the walls. I told myself it's the same as always, dark, empty, and harmless. But halfway through, I couldn't shake the sense that I was no longer alone. You know that feeling, when every hair on your arm rises and your body knows something that your brain just doesn't know yet? That's what hit me. My pulse jumped, and without meaning to, I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing, just darkness stretching back to the street that I'd already left behind. I picked up my pace, and my backpack jostled against my shoulder blades. And then, faintly, but there, nonetheless, the scrape of a shoe on concrete, somewhere behind me. The sound came again, quick and sharp, like somebody adjusting their stride to match mine. My stomach dropped. I forced myself not to turn around. Turning meant eye contact, acknowledgement. Predators would thrive on that. Just keep walking, I told myself. Don't give them any kind of reason. The alley stretched ahead of me, the exit a rectangle of orange glow from the streetlight beyond it. It wasn't that far, maybe 50 yards, but in the half dark with brick walls towering on either side, it felt like a tunnel, a goddamn trap. The footsteps behind me grew steadily, not rushed, not hesitant, just there, following. I broke. My walk snapped into a jog and I started booking it. My keys dug into my palm, wedged between my fingers like this shitty set of brass knuckles. The scrape of shoes answered me now, faster and closer. Whoever it was, they'd been waiting for me to pick up the pace.
Hey.
The voice was male, rough, like a smoker. I didn't answer, my lungs were seizing up. Every instinct screamed to not engage.
Hey, I'm talking to you.
The words shot down the alley, bouncing off the walls, and my jog now turned into a sprint. The exit was right there, 30 yards, maybe less. I could see the traffic beyond it, the safety of lit streets. Then, he was ahead of me. I don't know how. 1 second the alley was empty, and the next his silhouette filled the exit, cutting me off. He was tall, broad shoulders, something glinting in his hands. My legs locked and I skidded and almost fell. My chest heaved as the sounds of footsteps behind me didn't stop either, because there was more than one. Now, a laugh echoed, an overtly confident one. I spun around desperately, and the second man stepped out of the shadows that I'd just run past, blocking the way back. Thin and twitchy, with eyes that darted like he smoked something cheap and dirty. He had a length of chain looped around his wrist, dangling to the ground. The one at the exit raised up his hand. The glint of a knife was long and rusty. My throat was now dried up and no words came out. "Wallet," the twitchy one said. "And your phone, toss him down." I reached slowly into my pocket and my hand shook so bad I almost dropped the phone before I could even pull it free. My other still gripped my keys like an idiot. The one with the knife noticed me. "Oh, that's cute. You planning to scratch me with those?" They both laughed. I tossed my phone, then my wallet. Total, utter defeat. "That's better," the chain man said. Then he stepped closer and started stooping for my stuff. And that's when I took the opportunity and ran. Straight at the one with the knife, and I don't think he really expected it. None of them did. I roared, every ounce of panic forcing me forward, and my shoulder slammed into his face. He grunted and stumbled back, and the knife clattered to the pavement. Pain exploded in my side. The chain whipped across my ribs, tearing into me. I still didn't stop, though. I shoved that knife guy hard, sending him sprawling into the brick wall, then dove to the ground where the blade had landed. My fingers closed around the handle, slick with grime. I spun around, swinging wildly. The chain man leapt back, eyes wide. His smirk was no longer there. I slashed, the blade cutting the air inches from his chest, and he circled and cursed me. The one that I'd shoved into the wall was already pushing up, wheezing but furious. Blood was dripping from his mouth where his lip had split. His eyes were burning holes through me.
"You're dead, you little shit,"
he said. I didn't answer him. There's no time. My only thought was clear. Fight like a cornered animal or die here, nameless in an alley that smelled like piss and garbage. The chain whistled again, and this time I ducked and lunged forward, drove that knife out in a blind thrust. I felt it connect, hot resistance, then give. The chain man screamed, dropping his weapon, clutching his arm where the blood was now gushing through his fingers. Again, I didn't think, I just bolted for the exit. The knife guy lunged at me, catching my backpack strap, and the world yanked sideways. I hit the ground hard, cheek scraping against the asphalt, and my grip on that knife had slipped. He landed on me, snarling, his breath rancid in my ear. His hands were now clawing for the blade. As I shoved upward, twisting my hands free to find his face, I jammed my thumb into his eye as hard as I could. His scream was raw and animalistic. His weight then shifted just enough for me to roll. My hand found that knife again, and I didn't hesitate. I drove it backward once, twice, until his grip now slackened. Then I was up, stumbling, drenched in sweat and blood. The chain man was hunched, still screaming. The knife guy was writhing on the ground, clutching his side. I didn't wait another second to see if they'd follow. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, out into the street, into the flood of headlights and honking horns. People stared at me, but nobody stopped. The city swallowed their indifference like it always did. But I was alive, for now at least. I didn't stop running until my lungs were burning and my legs turned to rubber. I made it 3 blocks before I collapsed against a bus stop bench, heaving and sweat soaking through my shirt. My hands were sticky with blood, some mine, some of it not. The knife was gone. I must have dropped it somewhere in my sprint. People passed me. A couple slowed and glanced and then kept going. Nobody wanted to get involved with a bleeding kid at 2 a.m. I finally pulled my phone from my pocket, except it wasn't there. Right, I tossed it back in the alley. My fucking wallet, too. The only thing I'd carried out of that hell was blood and a heartbeat that felt like it was about to explode. I stumbled into a gas station. The clerk froze when he saw me, hand hovering over the panic button, until I choked out, "Call the cops." The police came, more questions and reports, flashing lights painting the window red and blue. They drove me back to the alley, and by then my adrenaline had drained into a cold ache that left me shaking. The alley looked the same as it always did. Cracked pavement, trash bags split open, shadows swallowing up the corners. The only thing missing now was the men. No blood trails, no chain, no knife, just emptiness. You sure this is where it took place?" one of the officers asked me, his tone obviously skeptical. I nodded so hard that my neck was hurting. "Yeah, they were here, both of them. One had a chain, the other had a knife. My words tumbled frantic, but the officer's expression didn't change. They took my statement anyway, promised to keep an eye out, and I knew from the way they scribbled half-hearted notes that nothing was going to come of it. Back at my apartment, I scrubbed my hands raw. The sink water ran pink, then red, and finally clear. And when I looked up, the mirror showed somebody that I didn't really recognize. Eyes wide, face pale, jaw tight like I was still waiting for the knife to come back down. I didn't sleep very well that night. I really couldn't. Every creak in my building would make me jolt awake. Every gust of wind outside sounded like their footsteps. 2 days later, I saw a headline on the local news. "Body found in West Side Alley." That same area, same description. No name released. Police suspected some kind of gang violence. I didn't really need the name. I already knew. And, well, that's the last time I ever took that shortcut. Didn't matter how tired I was, how late I got off, or how heavy my feet felt. I stick to the main street now, bright lights, crowds, and cameras, because that alley isn't a shortcut. It's a grave waiting for you to step inside. And I came closer than I'll ever really want to admit to being another nameless kid who never made it home. I actually used to love working the late shift. There was just something about the quiet of 2 a.m, the way the world outside the diner seemed to almost fall asleep. It really made the grind just feel easier. Customers were fewer, mostly just truckers, drunks, the kind of night owls who nursed black coffee until dawn. By then, the place would smell like bacon grease and burnt toast, no matter how much cleaner we sprayed. The best part of the shift, though, was my smoke break. 10 minutes out by the dumpsters, leaning up against the bricks with a cigarette and silence. No clattering dishes, no waitresses gossiping by the register, no manager peering up over my shoulder. It's just me, the night, and the hiss of my lighter. The alley behind the diner wasn't pretty. A single flickering bulb cast weak lights over cracked asphalt. The dumpsters reeked of sour milk and fryer oil. Some nights raccoons would crawl out, bold enough to hiss at me while I smoked. Other nights it was rats scurrying in the shadows. Still, I preferred it to the noise inside. Out here, it felt like the world had just forgotten me. On this night in particular, I lit up and pulled my apron loose, stretching my back. It was humid, sticky, the kind of air that clung to your skin. I'd barely taken 2 drags when I took notice of him. At first, I really thought he was just some other homeless guy digging through the trash, a tall figure lingering near the far dumpster. His outline was faint in the bad light. His clothes were loose, maybe a jacket far too big for his frame. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his eyes, fixated on me. I froze with my cigarette halfway up to my lips. Usually the homeless would avoid me, shuffling off without a word, but this man wasn't moving. He just stood there, leaning slightly, head cocked, watching me. Hey, I called out to him, voice firm. You can't be back here, man. Nothing though, not even a twitch. Just these pale teeth flashing when he finally stepped forward, and something sharp glinting in his hand. His grin widened as he stepped into the light. His face was oily and unshaven. His hair was slicked back in greasy strands. The thing in his hand wasn't a knife, at least not exactly. It looked like a sharpened screwdriver, duct tape wrapped around the handle. My cigarette fell from my fingers. I backed up and reached for the steel door that led to the kitchen. My hand brushed against the metal, but the latch had locked behind me. I need my keys, and they were still inside my apron pocket, inside the damn diner. The man's shoes scuffed closer, almost like he was enjoying this. Look, I don't have any cash, I said. Whatever you want, just... He didn't answer me, he just kept coming forward, head tilted, grin nailed on his face. The screwdriver caught the light again and my chest tightened. I darted left toward the row of dumpsters. The alley would narrow there, ending in a chain link fence with a gate that usually stuck halfway closed, if I could squeeze through. The man then lunged at me. I stumbled and slammed into a dumpster hard enough to rattle the lid. The reek of spoiled food hit my nose as I shoved past, scraping my arm on rusted metal. Behind me, his footsteps had picked up, quick and heavy, far too close. The gate loomed open, just like I'd hoped it to be. I dropped low and forced my body through the narrow gap. The chain link shredded my sleeve, skin tearing as I clawed forward, and I felt his hand brush up against my leg, fingernails scraping denim. I burst out onto the narrow service lane that ran behind the diner. My lungs seized. I bolted, my sneakers slapping against the asphalt. But he was fast, far too fast. His steps were slamming closer every second, echoing off the brick walls around me. I veered right, heart slamming up against my ribs. Ahead, another steel service door stood ajar. Somebody must have left it open for trash runs, and I dove inside. The storage hall was dim, lined with metal shelves stacked with flour bags and canned goods. My breath was now tearing out in ragged gasps. I sprinted down the road, hoping to loop around and slip into the diner unnoticed. But the door behind me creaked, and I heard the hinges whine.
Come out.
His voice finally rasped, crooked and broken like he hadn't even spoken in years.
Don't make it worse.
I crouched low and pressed up against a shelf, my knees now trembling. The screwdriver scraped against metal as he dragged it along the racks, each screech louder than the last. I couldn't stay still though. I forced myself to crawl, keeping low, weaving through the boxes of styrofoam cups and cartons of ketchup packets. And then I heard footsteps ahead of me. He cut me off. I spun back, but he was there too, slipping between the shelves like he'd almost been here before, like he knew the place better than I did. My panic surged. My hand shot out and grabbed the nearest thing that I could find, a glass bottle of hot sauce, and when he lunged, I swung. The bottle shattered up against his cheek, spraying red across his face. He screamed, clutching his eye, and the screwdriver clattered below. I didn't have time to think. I shoved him hard and ran. His body then slammed up against the shelves, metal rattling, boxes toppling. I bolted through the hall, past the prep station, bursting out into the kitchen diner. Grease popped on the stove. The cook spun around, wide-eyed. Jesus, what the fuck? Before I could answer, the man then barreled through the doorway, blood running down his cheek, screwdriver now back in his hand. The cook grabbed the first thing within reach, a cast iron skillet, and swung it like a bat. The crack was sickening. The man's head snapped sideways and his body collapsed in a heap on the linoleum. Silence, just the hiss of the fryer and my own ragged breaths. I stared at the man's body, chest heaving. The grin was gone, and his teeth were red. "Call the cops," I whispered to him. The cook just nodded at me and fumbled for the phone. A few seconds now passed, and when I looked down again, the man wasn't there. I heard the door to the alley banging open and then swinging on its hinge. The night air then rolled in, and the cook cursed and dropped the phone. We both rushed out back, and the alley was empty. It's the dumpsters and the shadows. The police showed up 10 minutes later, but by then, I was sitting on a milk crate out back, chain smoking like my lungs didn't even matter anymore. My hands were still shaking, and every time that steel door creaked, my stomach would flip like I thought he was coming back in. The officers searched the alley, and of course nothing. No man, no blood trail, just that broken hot sauce bottle in my shredded up sleeve. The cook swore up and down that he'd hit the guy with the skillet, that he felt bone give when it connected. They nodded and jotted a few notes, promised to file a report. But their eyes said the same thing that they were probably thinking. We don't believe you. One officer muttered to us, it's probably just some tweaker. They tend to scatter when they hear sirens, you know? I wanted to scream. Nobody moves like that. Nobody takes a skillet to the skull like that and then just gets up and walks away, then disappears. For weeks after this event, I didn't step out back for a smoke. Every night I thought I felt those eyes again, head cocked and that grin far too wide. Every time I locked the dumpster gate, I half expected him to be waiting on the other side. One morning, the diner's small TV was tuned to the local news, and I almost dropped my tray when his face filled the screen.
Authorities are searching for this man, wanted in connection with multiple assaults in the county. Witnesses describe his weapon of choice as a sharpened screwdriver.
The grainy photo on screen was the same face that I'd seen grinning at me behind the dumpster. Oily hair, hollow cheeks. The news said that he'd been living off-grid, drifting from town to town, attacking women behind bars, diners, laundromats. All the same setup, late at night when nobody was looking. I stood there frozen, coffee pot in hand, listening as the anchor added,
Police believe he may still be in the area. Citizens are urged to use caution.
That was 2 years ago, and to my knowledge, they never caught him, and his face faded from the news cycle, replaced by newer stories, fresher crimes. But every single time I walk home at night, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder still. And still to this day, every time when I take the trash out, my hand will shake when I grab the back door latch. I cut the engine and let the van tick quiet. Midnight air is heavy, pressing in through the cracked window. Dumpsters line up in the alley, the smell of rot and grease seeping inside. I tilt my seat back, just 10 minutes. 10 minutes shut-eye before the next run. Phone alarm set, hat low, eyes closed. Then I hear a scraping sound. My eyes snap open. A heart kicks hard. Another scrape, another thud, heavy and final like something hitting the pavement. I sit up and grip the wheel. My headlights catch two men at the mouth of the alley. They're dragging a carpet, long and heavy. The ends wrapped up in duct tape. It bends in the middle, too much weight for anything but a body. My throat closes. One man adjusts his grip, the other turns. His face lifts, eyes catching mine through the windshield. He freezes and his head tilts. Recognition. The carpet drops and both men are now looking at me. They start walking toward the van. Keys twist, engine coughs and dies. Fuck. They're coming closer now. One swings a pipe in his hand, the other got something shorter and sharper. I twist again and the engine roars. Relief floods and I'm gone in a snap and slam that gear in a drive. The tall one's hand clamps the door handle and yanks hard. It's locked. He smashes the glass with a pipe and the van shakes. I floor it. My tires are screaming, rubber burning. His hand slips off, and the short one pounds on the side, fists thundering like gunshots. I lurch out of the alley, boxes tumbling behind me. My eyes are wide and my hands are locked on the wheel. A crash ensues. Metal explodes across the street. I clip some trash bins. My van slows, a little too slow. Then I hear my side door slide. He's in. An arm reaches and grabs a package and hurls it out, and his fingers claw for me next. I swerve really hard and the van fishtails. His grip then rips loose. He stumbles, curses, and fades off in the mirror. I don't think twice, I gun it. Another alley ahead. I swing in and it's narrow, tighter, walls closing in, headlights bouncing over the graffiti and broken glass. It's a fucking dead end, a fence with no way out. I slam my brakes and the van skids sideways. I turn the lights off quickly, duck low, and hold my breath. Footsteps echo off in the dark, slow and confident. Pipe scrapes against a brick. Screeches fill the alley, and it crawls up my spine. I glance, and my only chance is that gap between the dumpsters, and the side door is cracked open. I grab my phone, push it in my pocket, and throw open the passenger door, which creaks far too loud. I hear them sprinting. I dive and squeeze through the metal, tearing my arm open. Heat and blood. I don't stop. Push the door and it gives. I'm inside. A hallway swallows me, dark air thick with mold. My shoes slap against the concrete, every step echoing. Then their voices pour in behind me. I sprint blind, crash into a wall, and my shoulder starts screaming, but I keep running. A stairwell up, legs pump fire. Every floor the same, peeling paint, busted lights, trash crunching under my feet. The footsteps slam the stairs below me. Pipe bangs against the rail.
You shouldn't have seen that.
Certain death ahead. Room ahead, I dive in. Drop low behind a couch split open with springs. My breath rattles, my sweat drips. Silence, then creak of the floorboards. They're here. Bottle under my knee rolls, clinking across the tile. Shit. The knob twists, and I explode through the wall. Rotten wood splinters. Plaster rains down. I tumble into another hallway, coughing dust. Pain lights up my arm, but I'm moving. Stairs again, down this time, 2 at a time. Chest tearing open, lungs clawing up for air. There's an exit sign ahead, glowing red and buzzing. I slam through the door. Street, light, cars rolling by. I stumble out into the open, blood streaking my arm. My chest is heaving, my knees are ready to buckle. People stare, some stop, none move. I spin. Doorway is empty, just dark, just still. The cops come later, flashing lights, yellow tape, questions that cut deeper than the wounds on my arm. I point to the alley, the carpet, the men. They search and nothing, just trash bags and flies. I tell them about the building. They check, condemned, empty, no footprints but mine. They look at me like I'm crazy. Long night, one says, scribbles it down. But I know the way to that carpet, the way it bent, the eyes finding me through the glass, that voice, calm as death. Weeks later, on the news, body found outside town, carpet, duct tape. They called it gang violence, retaliation, neat little box. The cabin was perfect. It was a 2-bedroom tucked into the pine trees, about 20 minutes outside of Mendocino. Little wraparound porch, string lights, one of those open concept kitchens with big windows and this absurdly deep farmhouse sink. I loved every inch of that damn place. We booked it for our 3-year anniversary, just me and Alyssa. No kids, no work, no phone signal. I remember the first thing that she said when we walked in was, "It smells weird in here." I laughed, but she didn't. The host, Lorraine, had left this note on the countertop, handwritten. It said, "Welcome Brandon and Alyssa. Please make yourselves at home. There's wine in the fridge, firewood stacked out back, and a telescope on the deck. Enjoy the view. Sunsets here are everything. One note, the closet in the master bedroom is locked for storage. Please don't try to force it. Thank you." That was that. Warm, casual, totally normal, right? We unpacked, poured some wine, and took 100 selfies with the trees in the background. Everything felt pretty easy, except that closet. It was on the far wall of the bedroom, standard size, stock wide door with this old silver padlock on the latch. Not some high-end combo lock, just one of those clunky ones you can get at pretty much any hardware store. At first, I really didn't say anything, but Alyssa began noticing me glancing at it throughout the night, even while we brushed our teeth. "You're gonna be weird about that closet the whole trip, huh?" "No," I said back. "It's just a locked door and a house that's supposed to be ours for the weekend." "Storage," she reminded me. "She said so in the note." "But storage for what? It's a vacation rental, not a personal cabin, and that padlock looked pretty new. We laughed it off and went to bed early. And that was the last normal night that we had inside that house. The next day, we were pretty busy. Coffee on the porch, hiked through the redwoods, took more dumb selfies at this overlook, and watched a hawk dive right through the fog. It was a perfect day. Still, every time we came back into the bedroom, my eyes would go straight back to that closet. It didn't do anything, it just sat there, unmoving and locked. But for me, it made that whole room feel off balance, like a splinter in your finger, small and visible, but always there, always present. That night while Alyssa showered, I walked over to it, ran my hand along the grain of the wood. The padlock was old school, a solid metal shackle key entry. I didn't touch it, just leaned in close. And I could swear when I did so, I heard breathing. Not loud, not even clear, just a faint, steady shift of air. I backed away and almost tripped over the nightstand. When Alyssa came out, towel wrapped around and smiling at me, I didn't say anything to her. I didn't want to ruin the night. We watched a movie, split the last of that wine, and then crawled into bed by 10. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, groggily, I really wasn't sure why, but then I heard it, a soft thump from the closet. Not loud or frantic, just a dull, solid noise, like something shifting inside it. I held my breath, and then another thump, followed by a scratch. I reached over and Alyssa was dead asleep. The house was quiet, no pipes, no wind, no creaking floorboards, just that sound from the closet. I sat up, heart pounding, and just stared at the door. The padlock was still there. I got up and walked over, pressed my ear to the door. Nothing though. I waited a little longer. Then, right at the edge of my hearing, I heard it again, breathing. I sat up and didn't sleep the rest of the night, and the next morning, I told Alyssa. She laughed at me at first, thought I was winding her up or something, but when she saw my face, she stopped. "What kind of sound?" she asked me. "Thumping, scratching, breathing. I know how all that sounds, but it's what I heard." She stared at the closet and bit her lip. "Do you think there's like a animal maybe in there?" "Too big." "What do you mean too big?" "I don't know the sound, it just felt big, like human." She stepped closer to the closet and looked at the padlock. "It's the same one, right?" "Yeah." We debated about calling the host, and eventually Alyssa wound up sending a text. "Hey, Brandon thought he heard something in the closet last night. Just want to make sure there's no animal or any issues. Thanks." We waited and didn't get a response. We checked our signal. No bars, so we tried the Wi-Fi. Still out. That's when I remembered the welcome book saying there was a landline in the kitchen. I picked it up and, of course, no dial tone. That afternoon, Alyssa went to go lie down. I stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge, trying to psych myself up to make some kind of lunch. And then I took note of something. The wine bottle. It was on the counter. I know we left it on the coffee table. I walked into the living room, blanket folded, TV remote placed neatly in the center of the rug. Not how we left that either. Alyssa for sure hadn't done it. I asked her, and she swore she didn't. Then we realized we'd both been outside for a while earlier. Alone. Not long, but enough. Somebody had been inside. That night we barricaded the bedroom door with the dresser. Not because of the closet, because of everything else. No cell, no internet, no way to call out. Something had changed. We aren't alone out here. Not really. Alyssa tried her best to stay calm, but her eyes kept darting back and forth to that closet. "What if," she whispered to me, "what if somebody's living in there?" Her words sat in the air like smoke. I didn't answer her. At exactly 2:14 a.m., that scratching started up again. And then, the knob turned. I watched it turn. The padlock held, but something pulled, really hard. I watched the wood flex. Alyssa was awake now. She saw it too and clapped her hand over her mouth. We didn't move or breathe. Then the noise stopped and we waited, long enough to convince ourselves, hopefully, it was over. Then came a voice from inside that closet, a dry, whispery rasp. "I'm cold." When the sun was up, we left. Didn't pack, didn't clean, didn't say goodbye. Just grabbed our shoes, our phones, and ran. The front door was still locked, but that back slider unlatched. We didn't look in the closet again. We didn't really want to know at this point what was behind it because whatever or whoever was in there wanted us to open it. And we almost did. 15 miles later, we hit the first gas station with signal. Alyssa called the sheriff's department in Mendocino County, filed a report, gave them the address, told them everything, word for word. The dispatcher was polite, said they'd send somebody out, but when we followed up 3 days later, there was no report filed. No record of anything at that cabin at the address, no listing under Lorraine's name. When I checked the rental site, the listing was gone, wiped clean, no history, no reviews, nothing, like it never even existed. Occasionally at night, I found myself thinking back to that voice, the way it sounded like it hadn't spoken in weeks, the way it said just those 2 words, "I'm cold." That wasn't a threat, but I don't really know what it was. I think if we answered back, if we had said anything back, if we tried to help, I'm not sure we would have made it out. We might be part of the closet now too. And then somebody else would be reading Lorraine's welcome note, drinking her wine, ignoring the locked door on that far wall. It was only supposed to be for one night, just a crash pad on the way to Flagstaff. Me and my friend Nate road tripping from LA, trying to make it to his cousin's wedding without coughing up any hotel money. We found this little place in the desert outside Kingman, cheap and clean, a small adobe-style house off a dirt road with gravel driveway and a sagging porch. It had character, 4 stars, no real red flags, and it was available for that one night only. I snapped it up in 5 minutes flat. We got there just around 8 p.m. Sun was already gone, air still warm around us. My phone was on 3% battery, but I had the check-in instructions saved. Thank God. Key under the fake rock by the front steps. Simple enough. I grabbed it and walked to the door and stopped because, well, it was already open. Just slightly. Nate glanced over at me. Did you open it?" "No, dude, I just got the key." He slowly pushed it the rest of the way open and the lights were on. We both stood there for a second, long enough to notice the TV flickering in the living room, and a beer can on the kitchen island, and a pair of sandals by the door. Somebody was already here. I double-checked the listing. August 12th, 1 night, 2 guests. Reservation confirmed. Then a voice from inside.
Hello?"
2 people stepped around the corner. A couple, mid-30s maybe, normal looking, slightly confused. Just like us. A guy was holding his phone. Are you the owners?" "No," I said back. "We booked this place tonight." They both immediately looked at each other. So did we." So we both pulled up our confirmations. Same address, same date, same check-in instructions. Nate and the guy walked outside to call the host, and of course, no answer. I stayed in the kitchen, awkwardly sipping water from the sink while the woman made small talk. "This is nuts," she said. "We stayed at like 20 rentals. This has never happened to us." We agreed to be chill, said it was probably some kind of glitch. "Look, let's just stay on opposite ends of the house," the guy said, "and we'll leave first thing in the morning." It wasn't ideal, but we were both really tired. The place had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. There was plenty of space. I guess we figured we can survive 1 night. But we shouldn't have stayed, because those people weren't who they said they were, and by morning, only 1 pair of shoes was still by the front door. That first hour was completely fine. We stayed in our room, and they stayed in theirs. Everybody was making these nervous jokes about tech glitches and modern problems. I played music low on my phone while Nate scrolled through Instagram, and eventually we both started to nod off. Then, out of nowhere, the lights go out, and not just in our room, the whole house. A hard click like a breaker's flipping. Nate sat up. "Hey, you hear that?" I opened up the door. The hallway was pitch black. "Hey," I called out. "You guys good?" No answer. I stepped forward and the floorboards creaked below me. That kind of creak you feel in your bones more than your actual ears. I found the kitchen by memory, grabbed my phone for light and aimed it around me. The breaker panel was just outside on the porch, so I went to the front door. I stopped. The sandals that were there earlier now were gone, and a breeze was moving through the house. Then a door slammed somewhere in the back. We got the power back on by flipping the main breaker, but the other couple didn't come out of the room after that. Nate knocked once lightly. "Hey, everything all right in there?" He was only met with silence. We went back to our room and locked the door, and that's when we noticed something. My duffel bag was now open. Not how I left that. Nate's wallet was on the floor, cards pulled halfway out. He picked it up slowly. "Did you?" I shook my head. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just listening. Every now and again, there'd be a soft shuffle in the hall, and once I heard water run for 5 seconds, then shut off. Around 3 a.m., I had to piss, but I didn't want to leave the room. I couldn't hold it anymore. I eased the door open, barefoot, phone in hand. The hallway light was off again. I crept toward the bathroom, passing the living room, and stopped cold. The woman was standing there, in the corner, not moving, just standing, barefoot, facing the wall, arms down at her sides. Almost like she'd been placed there, full Blair Witch bullshit. I froze and she didn't react, not even when the floor creaked under my feet. I backed up slowly and made it to the bathroom and locked the door. Inside, the cabinet under the sink was wide open. Inside that, my backpack. All right, I'm done. Time to fucking bounce. I woke Nate, told him what I saw, and he didn't argue. We threw our shit together fast and made for the front door. And now it was locked. Not deadbolted, but chained from the inside. That chain had not been there when we arrived. Nate moved to unlock it. That's when the guy stepped out of the second bedroom, right behind him, and he had a bat in his hand. Aluminum, clean, and brand new. "You guys leaving already?" he asked. I moved between them slowly. Yeah, we're heading out, early start." He smiled. "You sure? You've only been here for a few hours." And that's when I noticed this scar, a thick white line across his throat, like somebody had already tried to cut him a long time ago. He saw me looking and his smile widened. From behind me, the woman whispered, "We just wanted some company." Nate unlocked the chain and I yanked the door open, and we both ran. Didn't stop until we hit the car. We jumped in, slammed the doors, and started it up with shaking hands. They didn't follow. They just stood in the doorway, watching us drive away. We filed a report the next morning. Cops visited the rental, found nothing. No couple, no bat, no signs of any kind of break-in. When they pulled the reservation logs from the property manager, there was only one booking listing for that night, ours. They checked the key logs, only one use on the key box, ours. There's no sign or record of anybody else being there. And the strange part, the owners hadn't rented that house in almost a year, said that they'd taken it offline after a break-in. When the property manager asked us who gave us the link, we pulled it up and of course, listing gone, wiped. The only thing left in the browser history was this weird dead redirect, something called sharebnb.co/justforyou. We waited weeks for answers and there never were any. The cop said the locks hadn't been tampered with, the host hadn't given out any kind of spare key. No prints besides ours, no damage, no physical evidence, no nothing. They treated us like we were exaggerating something, maybe mistaken, maybe high. But I remember the bat. I remember the woman staring at the wall like she was possessed. I remember my backpack moved into a space that I hadn't touched, a very weird one at that. We tried to track that link again, sharebnb.co just for you, but it was gone. Even the cached version led nowhere, a blank page with the words, "Thank you for booking." And beneath that, in this tiny gray font, more guests arrive every day. We booked that cabin because we wanted some kind of quiet. My wife Laura needed a break from work and the kids were burnt out from school, and I just wanted to feel like a man again. Build some fires, grill some steaks, let my youngest shoot a BB gun at cans from the deck, pretend that we were pioneers instead of just tired people from Phoenix. It was a rental just outside of Pine Top, up past the ski cabins and seasonal condos, far enough away from the main road that the last stretch was all dirt and pine needles. The photos made it look rustic, but clean. Big stone fireplace, bunk beds, a wraparound porch with a hot tub that barely worked but looked really great in those pictures. And no cell service. That was really the appeal to us. No buzzing or news, no texts from work, just the five of us, me, Lauren, our teenage daughter Emma, and the twins, Ryan and Blake, 9 years old and always yelling about something. We got there on a Thursday afternoon. Weather was perfect. The air had that high country scent, half pine, half soil, like the whole mountain was freshly watered. We unpacked, picked bedrooms, and let the kids explore the trails behind the house. It really did feel like a reset. Dinner was burgers on the grill, sunset through the trees, s'mores over the fire pit. Emma rolled her eyes at the twins and pretended not to be having fun. Laura sipped red wine from a camping mug and said, "We should do this every year." It really was the kind of night that you don't realize you'll miss until it's gone. Then a knock came at 3 a.m., 3 sharp raps, right at the front door. I sat up in bed, heart pounding like I'd been yanked from underwater. Laura whispered to me, "What was that?" "I don't know. Stay here." I grabbed the fireplace poker and crept down the stairs barefoot. The knock didn't come again. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing, just moonlight and trees. So I opened up the door. Nobody there, no footprints, no wind, just the cold, quiet woods and the sound of blood in my ears. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt and checked the windows one by one. Still didn't see anything. Not a branch out of place, not even a breeze. So I told myself maybe it was an animal, a falling pine cone. Hell, maybe the twins left something against the door that tipped over. Now, I didn't believe it, of course, but I needed to say it. Laura didn't ask any questions when I got back into bed. Just pulled the blanket tighter and slid closer to me. The next morning, I checked the front porch again. Still nothing, but there were boot prints and they weren't ours. They weren't there the day before either. Big ones, treaded. Not hiking boots, work boots. I followed them. They started down the gravel drive and led up to the porch steps and then stopped at the front door. No return trail though, just a set of tracks coming in from the woods. I didn't tell Laura. I just kept an eye out. Didn't let the kids go exploring that day. Said there were bears in the area and I didn't want to risk it. I checked my phone. Still no service. I tried the cabin's emergency Wi-Fi hotspot and of course it was dead. The landline by the kitchen was unplugged. Some frayed wires with no dial tone. No signal, no internet, no fallback. It was just us. That night I locked everything down. Windows, curtains, and I left the outside lights on. But at 3 a.m. once more, the knocking came back. Same rhythm, same 3 knocks. This time Laura actually heard it too. She sat up straight first, eyes wide. "That's not an animal." I nodded back at her. She reached for her phone, but I already knew it was no help. I got out of bed and grabbed that same poker and moved slowly down the hallway. When I reached the living room, I didn't go to the door right away this time. I looked out the side window first and saw somebody standing on the porch. Not moving, not speaking, just standing. His face was in shadow, wearing something heavy like a jacket, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly like he was listening. Then, like he felt me watching, he turned and looked straight at the window, and I quickly ducked out of view. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink, and when I looked again, he was gone. I didn't sleep and stayed up the rest of the night, and at sunrise I walked the perimeter. Boot prints were everywhere this time, around the porch, around the sides, by the window, even at the back door, like he'd been circling while we slept. When I went to check our SUV, the tires were slashed, all 4, clean cuts. Then I had to tell Laura everything, the guy, the footprints, the tires. I thought that she'd fall apart. Instead, she went into triage mode, packed snacks, filled the bathtubs, charged flashlights, and the kids started asking questions we didn't want to answer. I found a trail cam nailed to a pine tree just off the back deck, and that wasn't ours, not part of the listing at least, and definitely not mentioned in the binder. I pulled a card and popped it into my laptop. Each file was named by timestamp, and each one was a photo, black and white, motion triggered. At first, all of the files were us, unpacking the car, kids running down the trail, me at the grill. Then came the night shots, us through the window, sleeping, sitting at dinner, Laura brushing her teeth, me reading a book, all taken from that tree line. Then the final file, it was from the night before, a full body shot. That man, standing on the porch, inches from the door, looking into the camera, his face lit by the porch light. Not a ski mask, no balaclava, just a man's face, plain and unbothered. That night we took turns watching the windows. Laura kept the kids in our room, reading bedtime stories, and she didn't finish. At 3 a.m. we heard footsteps on the roof. That wasn't a bird or the wind. Footsteps, slow and creeping. It went from one side of the house to the other. I raised that poker, and Laura grabbed the fire extinguisher. We waited. A soft clatter then came from the chimney. At dawn, I spotted something on the back deck, nailed to the railing with a screwdriver. A photo, one of the trail cam prints. Our family sitting at dinner, Emma smiling, Laura was mid-laugh and me mid-bite. Scrawled across the bottom in thick black marker, "Thank you for staying." We left as soon as the sun cleared, didn't even drive the SUV, we hiked out. Me still with that fire poker, Laura with the twins, and Emma dragging a duffel bag. It took us almost 2 hours on foot to reach the main road. I flagged down a tow truck, and the guy thought I was crazy until I showed him the photo. He didn't really ask many questions after that, just nodded and gave us a ride back into town. He even agreed to go pick up our car after we gave him the address. The police were polite, not helpful. They took my statement, looked at the tire tracks, the trail cam, the prints in the dirt, said they'd check the local trail cams, maybe put in a request for footage from nearby hunting blinds. But without a name or suspect, I knew nothing would really come of it. It was just another trespassing incident. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no real damage. When I asked him about the trail cam, the deputy just shrugged at me. There's a lot of creeps out there, and some just want to watch. The air currently had that brittleness to it, the kind that you really only get when fall is past its peak and winter's waiting around the corner. Clay and I had been on the ranch since sunup, checking troughs, tightening wire, hauling scrap out of the pastures before snow turned it all into hidden hazards. That was the job this time of year though, tidy the edges, put things in order, make sure nothing came back to bite you when the ground froze and the herds got mean. The cattle weren't where they should have been. They drifted to the south side, bunched together, leaving the northern pasture strangely empty. Animals seem to know things before men do, and I took their absence as some kind of sign, though I didn't say it out loud. Clay seemed to notice it too. He made a joke about it, something about lazy cows, but I caught the way his eyes kept flicking to the end of the property line, where the cottonwood stood gray against the sky. We'd been told to leave that edge alone. Old man Mathers, who owned the spread, was really clear about it. Fix what needs fixing, but don't go looking for work where it don't call to you, he'd said, with that kind of weight too. Neither of us asked any questions. You don't when the man's signing your checks and prefers a quiet room. But work has this weird way of pulling you towards trouble sometimes. A section of the fence was down, wire sagging into the dirt, post leaning over from the rod. We could have left it for another day, sure, but the light was thinning, and both of us knew an open fence line was a risk that we couldn't really afford. Coyotes, strays, anything could slip through. So we rode out on the north boundary, tools in the bed of the truck, trailing dust behind us. I remember the moment thinking something felt weird, like crossing over into sacred ground, but I told myself it's just the season, the cold, the shadows of dawn. Still, that feeling in my gut had the truth nailed down already, before I even knew it. By the time we reached the far edge, the sky was beginning its slow collapse into dusk. Clay cut the engine, and for a few seconds, nobody moved. I took stock the way I always do, listening, measuring, noting what stood out. Out here, the silence was loud. No birds, no crickets, no cough of cattle, just wind in the brush. We stepped down and walked the fence line, boots crunching over the frost-hardened weeds. The wire had snapped clean at one post, leaving a gap wide enough for almost anything short of a bull to wander through. Clay muttered about how long it would take to set new posts, and I was only half listening. My attention was locked on a smell. It wasn't manure or brush fire or anything you'd normally associate with ranch work. This was coppery, rank, decay sitting heavy in the back of my throat. I followed it. 20 feet in the grass, I found the cow. She wasn't one of ours though. The brand mark was unfamiliar, burned deep into her hide, half hidden beneath the tearing. She'd been mauled. Ribs were split apart, belly torn open, tongue lolling off gray and stiff. Coyotes had done some of the work, but not all of it. I crouched close enough to see the edges of the wounds, jagged but not clean. I made a note about the drag marks heading further off into the brush as well. Jesus Christ, Clay said behind me, pulling his bandana up over his nose. That ain't ours, is it? No, I answered back. The brand's from over by Gunnison's place, I think, a couple of miles out. We stood over her for a minute, neither of us really eager to admit what it meant. A dead cow wasn't unusual, but one mauled this close to the line with no signs of a predator lingering set me on edge. Animals don't take cattle down this way unless they're desperate or unless something else is in play. Free-range cows are meaner than hell, and they don't really make for an easy kill. Clay said we should just patch up the fence and go, leave the carcass for the scavengers. I almost agreed with him, and then I saw the boot. It jutted out of the brush like earth had spit it up. Leather cracked and I froze. Clay followed my stare. We didn't speak. You don't really when you see something like that. I grabbed hold and pulled up. The ground gave up its secret slowly. First, the leg, stiff and heavy, then the rest. A body, half buried in leaf litter, chewed in places the way the cow had been. The face was gone, stripped down to bone, hands curled tight, frozen in this clawing gesture. He'd fought to the very end. Clay cursed again and turned away like he might vomit. I continued to look. My habit is to take in the details even when I don't want to. The clothes were ranch clothes, denim, wool, boots worn thin from saddle work. He wasn't carrying a wallet, or if he had, the scavengers had taken it. No obvious marks of identification, just another working man, cut down and left where nobody could find him. A sharp sound then broke the moment. I spun, hand on the knife in my belt. Out from the tree line, a horse stood there, watching us. She was in rough shape, coat dulled, ribs showing, mane tangled up into knots. Still saddled, stirrups hanging loose. The reins were trailing in the dirt. She looked ready to bolt, but too tired to commit to it. Her eyes were rolling white in that low light. Clay breathed out shaky, collecting himself. That's his, right? It has to be, he said, nodding at the corpse, then at the horse. His hand came to rest on the revolver on his waist. I mean, it made sense. A cow strays through a broken fence, a hired hand saddles up to fetch it. Somewhere along the line, everything goes wrong. The cow ends up gutted, the rider ends up dead, the horse wanders until hunger and exhaustion drag her back. That was the story the scene wanted us to believe, and boy, was it believable. We circled slowly, careful to not spook the animal. I kept my hands low, talking softly. Eventually, she let me grab the reins. The leather was cracked and stiff. I checked the saddle for marks, a brand, stamp, tag, but nothing. Whoever owned her had made no mark. Honestly, we probably should have left it at that. Should have taken the horse and the corpse back to Mathers, called it in. Let the sheriff sort out all these details, but something continued to gnaw at me. I personally wanted confirmation, needed it even. So I told Clay that we had to go back to the body. He didn't really seem to like the idea, but he followed me. We stood over the dead man again, both of us swallowing against the stench, the buzzing flies that clung to him even in the cold. I crouched down and examined the wounds more closely. The teeth marks were obvious, but they weren't the only marks. I pushed aside the torn jacket, holes, small, round, and ragged at the edges. Not made by claws or tusks, but definitely bullet holes. Clear as day. They ran through the chest, peppered up with the ribs. I counted 3. Then I looked at his skull, or what was left of it. The top was gone, shattered clean through. I didn't really need to be a coroner to recognize the truth. Yeah, this wasn't animals, I said. Clay blinked at me, then looked closer for himself. His face drained white. Jesus, is that a bullet hole in his head? He was shot, then left out here. Coyotes just cleaned up what was left, I surmised. We found ourselves standing there in silence once more, the weight of it all choking any more discussion. The questions started stacking up in my head. Who was he? Why would somebody kill him out here, in the scrub at the edge of Mather's Land? Why leave the horse saddled, wandering around? Clay was the first to break the silence. "We need to go," he said, and he actually sounded kind of scared. I agreed. This wasn't just a dead hand and a stray cow anymore. This was straight up murder, and murder has a way of spreading, if you know what I mean. We hauled the horse along, neither of us talking now. The fence remained broken, wire sagging, tools untouched from where we dropped them off. The work didn't really matter anymore. What matters was getting back before somebody saw us out here and maybe shot us too. The wind picked up behind us as we walked, carrying with it the rustle of brush, the shifting of shadows. I kept my eyes moving, checking the tree line, the ground, the space behind us. Once you find a body riddled with bullets, you can't help but wonder if the shooter is still nearby, watching his work, waiting to see if somebody can find it. By the time we reached the truck, my nerves were shot. Clay got the horse loaded, as we just happened to have space in the horse trailer, while I continued to scan the horizon. The land around us was quiet and still. We drove back without really speaking, and finally, the ranch house lights came into view, warm and steady, but they didn't feel like safety, not with the knowledge that we now carried. We called it in as soon as we made it back to the house. Mathers didn't ask questions, just dialed the sheriff with that flat tone of his. Clay and I sat on the porch, watching the horse pace circles around the hitching post, feeling restless. Her eyes seemed to roll back every time the wind shifted. She didn't want to be here any more than we did. The deputies arrived just before sundown. They wanted us to lead them back out there, walk them straight to the body, the cow, the fence. So we did. It felt different now, going back. The land had now turned mean in the dark. Every tree bent like it wanted to fall on us. The body was still there, exactly where we left it, but something about him seemed smaller now, almost like he'd sunk deeper into the earth, half swallowed in just a handful of hours. The deputies said very little. They took photos, collected casings, though I never saw them bag anything. One deputy had checked the horse back at the house, running his hands down her legs, checking the teeth. "She's been out here a lot longer than a day," he muttered. "Closer to a week, I'd say." That didn't sit right. A week alone, saddled and trailing reins, and nobody had noticed her until now? We thought we saw everything out there. We gave our statements and left nothing out. Still, when I looked in their faces, I could tell they were already burying it in paperwork. "Some kind of accidental shooting," one said later. "Even though I don't know how you explain to put 3 rounds in a man's chest and then 1 through his skull by accident. Probably some drunks pot shooting in the brush, and this unlucky fellow was standing there, taking a leak or something." The investigation stretched on through November. A few strangers came and went, state men, not locals. They brought clipboards, asked pretty much the same questions, circled around the horse like they held some kind of key. At one point, they shaved her mane down to the skin, looking for marks. Clay swore that he saw a scar under the hair, a brand that had been burned over to erase it. They wouldn't let us close enough to confirm, though. Then there was the matter of the boots. The coroner swore the tread pattern didn't match anything sold locally, not in the country, maybe not in the state. Imported, he said. Military issue or foreign exchange. Some of the details were really weird to me, but what do I know? After I started keeping a notebook, dates, details, odd scraps in the investigators that they clearly ignored, like the .223 shell that we found near the fence post 3 days after they supposedly combed the area, or the way the dead cow's brand didn't line up with any registered inside county records. Close but off, almost like it had been imitated. Clay told me I should burn the notebook, forget it, but I continued to write. By December, the case was cold. The official word was a trespassing drifter, cause unknown. The horse went unclaimed and sold at auction. I still can't shake what I saw. A body shot to pieces, boots that didn't belong, a horse half starved, and a cow that shouldn't have been there at all. It was like some kind of bad airport novel. Occasionally, sometimes when I ride out to that far fence line, I swear the air still carries that same copper tang. The cattle won't even graze there. Clay won't drive past it. I keep my notes, but not holding my breath. The road narrowed to little more than a cracked ribbon laid across the countryside. The map had promised this scenic drive, best leaf color this side of the country. But it was more isolation than really anything else. Acres of oaks and maples pressed in closely, their leaves showing off in this fire red, orange, and gold, while the blacktop wound us deeper into nowhere. "You're obsessed," my boyfriend said, smirking at me from the driver's seat. "All this for a photo shoot. We could have stayed in town taking pictures in front of the coffee shop pumpkins or something." I shot him a look. "Pumpkins don't count. This is about color, about the change. You'll see, the light hits just right out here." He shook his head, amused, but I saw the corners of his mouth twitching like he was holding back something sweeter than sarcasm. That was him, though, half teasing, half there just because he liked being around me. The windows were down, the air was cool enough to nip at my cheeks, carrying that sharp smell of wet leaves and faint musk of river water. I snapped a few pictures out the passenger window while he drove, barns fading behind us, power lines disappearing. When the road dropped us at this river crossing, I knew this was the spot. An old bridge, paint peeled to rust, spanning the water. The current below us was running hard, white caps breaking against the boulders midstream. I leaned forward in my seat. "Stop here." He eased the car into the shoulder. We got out and I felt the air grow colder near the water. The sun was dipping behind a cloud cover, draining the warmth. "Perfect," I said, lifting my phone. I framed the shot, trees reflecting the racing water, sky darkening, branches stretching out like veins. "Hold on, I'll get closer." He vaulted the guardrail before I could protest, his shoes scraping up against the rocks as he picked his way down the bank. "Careful," I called out. He grinned back up at me, cocky as always. "Relax, babe, I'm fine." I lowered the phone, heart ticking a little faster. "Seriously, it's slick down there. Just stay where you are." He waved me off, stepping onto this mossy rock that was jutting into the water. He was aiming for an angle shot, a dramatic one, the one that would blow all my pictures out of the water. He crouched, phone in hand, adjusting. Then came a sound of a sharp crack of wood giving way. His foot slid, his arms pinwheeled, and before I could scream, he was gone, splashed hard into the river. I screamed out for him. He bobbed up, coughing, arms flailing as the current grabbed him like a toy. He tried to fight, tried to angle back toward the bank, but the water was going really fast. I sprinted over to the guardrail, clutching the cold steel, eyes locked on his head as it spun downstream. I yelled out, telling him to hold on. But he was already being pulled away, dragged under the bridge, vanishing around the bend. I vaulted the guardrail and slid down the bank, knees buckling on that wet slope. Dead leaves and roots tore underneath my hands. The ground tilted toward the water so steeply, it felt like gravity had a personal grudge against me. "Babe!" I shouted, though the river was swallowing my words. The water was roaring loud down here, rushing over the rocks around the bends, carrying him further and further. I stumbled along the bank, crashing through the brush, following the brief flashes of his jacket between the trees before it disappeared. The trail, if you could call it that, was little more than a deer path, branches slapping at my arms, thorns catching in my jeans. My feet slipped on slick moss and wet soil, but I pushed harder, lungs tearing out in that cold air. Every second stretched with the thought of his head going under and not coming back up. Half a mile down, the river slowed into this wide bend, logs jammed together in the shallows, leaves spinning in the eddies. I stumbled out of the trees, scanning and praying. I saw movement at the water's edge. I lurched forward, thinking it was him, but it wasn't. The shape broke from the brush with a snort, squat and heavy, bristled hair slick with mud. It was a wild hog, big, maybe a couple 100 pounds, tusks curving like knives, eyes dark and mean. Another shape behind it, smaller but just as ugly. I froze, my brain still clawing to save him, stuttering to a stop in the sight though. The hog was pawing at the ground, shoulders rolling. It wasn't curious, it was pissed. Then I saw why. Off to the side, half hidden in the brush, lay the torn carcass of a deer. Its ribcage had been open like a bag of chips. The air stank of blood, thick and coppery, riding on the cold river wind. My stomach flipped. The hog's had a kill and it was standing on top of it. The big one squealed and my ears rang. Then it charged me. I turned and bolted, my feet barely even finding any traction in that mud. But the sound of it, hooves pounding, brush snapping, it was right behind me. I pumped my legs harder than they ever had before, lungs searing with fire. I cut left along the bank, branches clawing at my arms again. The hog crashed through it like they weren't even there, and its scream tore in the air closer and closer. I risked a glance back when I saw the flash of tusks. Mud sprang off its legs. Adrenaline spiked hot then, and I screamed. The ground then sloped down into the water. I slid and my feet got tangled, knees cracking into rock. Pain quickly shot up my leg, but I scrambled forward, hands clawing through the mud and the weeds. The hog skidded behind me, spraying earth. I scrambled up this half-rotted log that angled over the water, my hands burning on the rough bark, splinters biting in deep. The hog then rammed the log from below, the impact rattling my bones. I nearly pitched forward into the current myself. It backed up, snorted, and came again, and the log shuddered underneath me. I clung hard though, knuckles white, whispering nonsense prayers to myself, trying not to scream again. Another impact. The log cracked, part of it splintering. My boot slipped, my chest smashed up against the bark. I kicked down blindly, my heel connecting with the snout. It squealed, stumbled back a foot, and that was something, I guess. I shoved myself higher onto that log though, scrambling to the far side. My jeans tore open on a branch. The hog bellowed and circled, mud flying, but I didn't wait for it to come again. I leapt off the log and into the shallow water. The shock of the cold knifed through me. I splashed forward, stumbling, falling to my knees, scrambling back up, anything to put distance between us. The hog gave chase, crashing into the water behind me. Its bulk slowed down just enough for me to reach a cluster of rocks at midstream. I hauled myself up, scraping skin raw on jagged edges. The hog lurked in the shadows, glaring, huffing clouds of steam off into the cold air. It paced and splashed, but didn't climb the rocks. The smaller one had joined it now, squealing, teeth snapping at the air. They guarded their ground, the kill behind them. I stood there shivering, shoes heavy with river water, staring across the bend like I'd woken up in hell. Then a sound cut through the river's roar, coughing. I spun, eyes darting upstream. 50 yards away, tangled up in another mess of driftwood, was him, my boyfriend, half sprawled out on a log, choking up water, dragging himself toward the shallows. Relief tore through me. "I'm here!" I screamed to him. He lifted his head, dazed, confused, but eyes unfocused. I risked one last look at the hogs. They stood right where they were, watching, the big one grunting, ears twitching. Satisfied I was leaving, or maybe just too lazy to press any further. Either way, they didn't follow as I slipped off the rocks and staggered upstream. I half ran, half fell across mud and rock until I finally reached him. He was soaked, shaking, lips pale as paper. His breath was coming rattling out of him, but he was alive. I collapsed onto my knees beside him, grabbing his arm, pulling him up. "Don't you dare," I whispered, though I wasn't even sure what I meant. Don't die or don't scare me like that again, because honestly, he looked like a corpse. He coughed, spat out some water, and then managed to say, I told you you get your shot." It was a half joke, half delirium, but I clutched him and never wanted to let go. I hooked my arm underneath his and pulled, our feet sucking at the mud. He staggered upright, teeth chattering, his weight heavy against me. Every step felt burrowed, like the river could come back and claim him at any second. Behind us came another squeal though, high and furious. I twisted and the hogs were in fact following. First the smaller one, weaving through the brush, then the bigger. They weren't gonna let us slip away so easy, I guess. "Move!" I hissed to him, yanking him forward. We stumbled along the bank, crashing through brittle weeds and thorny undergrowth. My lungs were screaming for air, but fear shoved me a little faster. The hogs continued to tear after us. I could almost feel them at my back, the ground trembling even. One wrong step, one stumble, and they'd be on top of us. The slope ahead led up to the road. I dragged him, half hauling, half shoving, until we clawed over the lip and onto the asphalt again. The car waited 20 yards up, silver hood catching what little light remained. "Go! Go!" My voice cracked. We limped, slipped, and shoved ourselves forward. Behind us, the hog scrambled up the bank, squealing, eyes glinting with rage. The bigger one hit the pavement like a tank. It charged, closing in the distance fast. I fumbled my keys out from my pocket. The car beeped as I slammed the unlock button. I ripped the door open, shoved him inside, and then dove across the seat as that hog continued to thunder closer. That beast rammed the bumper with a bone-shaking crash. The whole car jolted, glass rattling in its frame. I screamed and jammed the locks. The hog then backed up, snorted, and slammed into the side panel, denting the metal with its skull. The smaller one just squealed and circled. "Start it! Start it!" he croaked beside me, but my hands were shaking. It took 2 tries before the engine finally roared to life. I threw it into gear and floored the pedal. The tires screamed, gravel sprang as we lurched forward. The hogs continued to give chase for 20 yards before dropping back. The bigger one planting itself in the middle of the road, watching us vanish away. I didn't slow down until the bridge was at least a mile behind us. He sat slumped in the passenger seat, shivering, eyes hollow. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles were aching. Outside the window, the October woods blurred into streaks of fire-colored leaves. They didn't look beautiful anymore. They almost looked like warning signs that we've been too dumb to read. There isn't a heroic follow-up to the story either. We left with our tails tucked firmly behind us, didn't call the police, game wardens, or even go to the hospital. What could we say or do? That a wild animal scared the shit out of us? There's not really any kind of help for that.